Yunifer's povey. I couldn't keep calm. I could even hear the sound of my heartbeat that kept on pumping. It felt like my whole body went jelly. The hand that was holding my phone was shaking and trembling. I tried to stand up and leave the rooftop. I even forgot that the anger towards the triplets. All I could think of right now is my brother that was caught by my mother. Where was the last time you saw him? Which area? Which place? I asked out of panic. I even left the campus and was about to ride the taxi when my wrist was caught, making me look back as I tried to retract my wrist from being caught by this person. It turned out to be Drake. "We have cars. We will help you. Just tell me where the place is, and we will go there together to find your brother," Drake calmly said while trying to soothe my emotions that are tangled like a thread. Hearing this, I couldn't help but agree. I need this kind of help for now. It doesn't matter whether I was upset, angry, or disappointed towards them, but for now I don't have time to let out these feelings. I'll have to think for my brother before I can think for myself. He is more important. The last time that I saw them was going down to the mountain camp. They went the right way, in the direction of the press alley. It has already been 5 minutes since they left. It was the voice of Asher's homeroom teacher, said while panicking. After all, it was her student that was being threatened by his mother, and she didn't even try to stop them. Rather, she couldn't do so because the mother insisted. And even the son, which is Asher, said that it was his mother who was the reason why the teacher felt helpless. She doubts the authenticity of the words of the so-called birth mother of Asher. That's why she immediately contacted Asher's sister, which is me. It seemed that Drake also heard our conversation. He let the twins, Ishid and Lawrence, sit in the back seat while I sat in the front seat and started the engine. After we arrived at the mountain where the homeroom teacher and the other kids were. When we arrived, the homeroom teacher rushed her way to meet us. Her face was filled with nervousness and panic, which can't be hidden by her fidgeting hands. Should I start calling the police? That so-called mother of Asher was suspicious. She had a dark circle underneath her eyes. Her hair hasn't even been washed and properly combed. She smelled like Tabco, which was why I was hesitant to hand Asher over. I already sent other teachers to follow the route which Asher's mother had taken. Currently, the latest update was that the mother dragged Asher to the abandoned building. They contacted me just now. The homeroom teacher named Anne hastily said while looking at me. Hearing this, I nodded my head and gave her my thanks before I gestured to Drake to drive to the abandoned building. Both the 4 of us immediately drove to Press Alley. When we arrived at the abandoned building, the other teachers, which were sent by the homeroom teachers, were on standby. They didn't get inside the building for fear of scaring the rat. Rather, they were hiding and were calling the police. Just when I was about to walk inside the building when the teacher stopped me from doing so. I looked at her with a frown, but she shook her head and whispered to me her words. "You can't go in. It's dangerous. We already called the police and they will be here soon," the teacher named Abby said while looking at me with worry, as if she feared that I might go inside and would get hurt. I shook my head and retracted the hand that she pulled. "I can't wait for the police," I calmly said as I went inside the abandoned building, leaving the teachers who tried their hardest to stop me but weren't successful because I was stubborn enough to go inside. Just when I was about to go, Drake spoke, which made me stop. "We will go with you to make sure that everything is fine," Drake offered while staring at me. I looked at him, as well as glanced at Ishid and Lawrence, who was also eager to go with me, but I shook my head to disagree with their offer. "No, there's no need for you to go with me. Mother Kilda could easily distinguish her fellow werewolves, especially an alpha like you. It would make her furious, and might even hurt my brother, so it would be better for me to go," I said with solemnity. "But," they looked at me with reluctance and hesitation in their eyes. Seeing them being worried, I couldn't help but smile as I nodded my head at them. "I'll be fine. We will continue our conversation after I'm done with my business. I'll be right back," I said with a calm tone while giving them an assurance smile as I got inside the building. When I went inside, my eyes narrowed as my breath hitched when I heard the sound of a whip that kept on whipping inside a room that it echoes all over. I even heard the whimpering cries of the one who got whipped, making me tremble as I felt an adrenaline rush all over me. I don't know where I got the sudden strength, but I don't have time to think about it as I dash towards the room where I heard the whimpering sound that it emitted. I kicked the wooden door hard, which made the door get thrown inside the room, revealing the scene that horrified me. My whole body trembled from anger as I could feel like I became a volcano with lava inside that are boiling ready to erupt. "How could you do this to your son?" I angrily said as I pushed her away, who was driven mad by drugs and was holding a whip, whipping my brother's back, who was curling on the floor and was in his wolf form. His back was oozing with his body, and his body was trembling. He kept on whimpering while protecting his head. Seeing this, my heart couldn't help but tightened. It was like a force that crushed my heart into pieces upon seeing my brother in this situation. I don't know what has gotten on to me as I took off the long sleeve that I was wearing and wrapped it around Asher, who was on the ground. I coldly glared at Mother Silda, who seemed to lose herself. "Just what the hell do you want from us?" I shouted with anger, and I didn't even notice that my original ocean eyes slowly turned silver. Even the canine in my teeth is starting to appear that I didn't even notice. Mother Kilda, who was quiet earlier, was now laughing madly as she tightened the hold of her whip. "Away. Do you think that the two of you can get rid of me? Never. I've been patient and roamed around the neighborhood just to find the two of you, but who would have thought that you are just hiding here? You will never be able to get away from me, my child. I am your mother." She angrily said, while at the same time, she was laughing like crazy. Hearing what she said, I couldn't help but snap. My last patience for her had snapped. "Mother, from the moment that we stepped out of your house, we are not your child anymore, nor you are our mother. Not a sane mother could do this to her children," I angrily said as I roared and rushed in her direction, reaching out to grab her on her wrist to restrain her while waiting for the city police. However, Kilda was more agile and stronger than me. Even though she was high due to taking drugs, it didn't lessen her strength, and her reflexes were still smooth as hell since she got more experience when it comes to fighting. That was why she easily restrained us and used violence to make us obey to us. When she managed to dodge my attack, she grabbed my wrist, making me instinctively back away, but she pulled me closer to her and kicked my stomach, making me groan from the pain. Blood spurted out from my mouth as Silda, whose face was filled with satisfaction upon seeing me suffer, tried to kick me on my stomach again, but I managed to attack her fist, punching her heavily on her face, making her staggered as she loosened the hold of my wrist, which was why I was able to back away from her. Seeing her looking in a daze and looking like she was seeing a star because of my punch, or maybe because of too much using drugs, she didn't have time to continue attacking me. When I saw that she no longer had the plan to attack me and was laughing from time to time, I let out a relieved sigh and stopped paying attention to her. However, when it comes to her, I have to make sure that everything is under my control, especially since, given Silda's attitude, she would pretend to be weak and then use everything that can be used for her to achieve what she wanted. That's how she is. Since she was already lost in her dreamland, I immediately tied both of her hands to her back using a rope and then put away her whip. Once I was certain that she can't break the rope, I immediately went towards my brother, who was lying on the floor while trembling. His small hands were tightly clutched on my long sleeve that wrapped around his body. Asher?" My voice quivered, as I could feel warmth sliding from my eyes down to my cheeks as I was trembling, holding him in my arms. He weakly opened his eyes, and when he saw me, his eyes sparkled despite the pain. Sister?" He called out hoarsely, and the corner of his mouth lifted upon seeing me. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but be brought to tears. I gently and carefully hugged him in my arms. "I'm sorry. Your sister failed to protect you again." I softly whimpered as I gently planted a kiss on his forehead. Asher shook his head weakly as he held my cheeks with his small hands. It's not your fault, sister. You protected me well." I shook my head. "But I was the one who let you participate in the camp for you to make friends or interact with the others, which led you to be kidnapped by our mother." Asher helplessly shook his head. "No, I was the one who voluntarily went to our mother. I let her kidnap me and take me even though I already know that she was up to no good. You were threatened by her," I softly said while I caressed his face. Although his face was pale, it wasn't much as paler as what I've seen when I arrived. It was a good thing that wolves had a self-healing ability, especially those who are in a higher rank like Alpha. Just when he was about to open his mouth and say something when I saw his eyes wide open. His eyes were panicked as he screamed at me. "Sister, dodge!" he shouted, which made me swift my body to the left side. Ack. It hurts. Although I managed to dodge the whip that Silda whipped at me, I was still a step late when I dodged, which result that half of her whip managing to hit my back. Yunifer's pove. It felt like my back was on fire, so this was what Asher had suffered too. It fucking hurts as hell, as if I'm being burned. I let out a soft groan as psychological tears rushed from my eyes, and I could even taste the rusty taste in my mouth. Yunifer. A loud voice calling out her name was filled with shock and worry upon seeing me being whipped by my mother, that even the back of me was filled with blood, and there was a large piece of my flesh that was torn after receiving the attack of the whip. I saw Lawrence, Ishid, and Drake hurriedly went in my direction. Even Asher, who was supposed to be wounded, was now trying his best to protect me with his small body. Lawrence helped me sit on the mat that he specifically brought and let me lie down on it. "I'll call the pack doctor," he said, and I could see that he was trying hard to calm, especially since the hand that he touched on my shoulder was trembling as droplets of sweat formed on his forehead. He panicked. I smiled weakly as I let him do so. After all, I don't want to refuse such a good opportunity, especially since I want my wound to be treated right away because it fucking hurt very much. I may look calm and smiley outside, but deep inside I kept on uttering every curse that I know because the back of me hurt so much. It was as if my flesh was being bitten by thousands of ants, and these ants were on fire, the kind of pain that won't last for minutes but could even hold on for hours. I gritted my teeth, stopping myself from screaming from the pain, and badly wanted to tear my back just to tear this pain. My head became blank because of the pain to the point that I couldn't think straight. I even thought of committing suicide just to end this pain because I couldn't take it anymore. But when I saw Asher, all those thoughts instantly popped like a bubble and disappeared like air. Asher was much stronger than me. He even suffered what I have suffered, yet he got through the pain and survived. When I looked at Asher, he was also looking at me silently, and his eyes didn't betray his feelings. It was filled with worries, especially after seeing that I was enduring the pain. Asher gritted his teeth and glanced at me first before looking at Lawrence with impatience. "Is your pack doctor here? I know how it felt like being whipped by our mother's whip, and it hurts so much. That's why you need to hurry up to tell your pack doctor to arrive as soon as possible." Hearing this, Lawrence nodded his head and answered, "Don't worry, I already contacted them with my mind link. They would arrive as soon as possible." Asher let out a sigh of relief, as he still guards me against anything that could harm me. Seeing this, I tugged the corner of Asher's clothes, making Asher look at me. "Relax and sit next to me. You are also badly injured just like me. Let Lawrence, Ishid, and Drake take care of the mother. I'm sure that they could defeat our mother and protect us, especially since they are alphas," I said mutely. I didn't even notice that there was a hint of trust and dependence in every word that I uttered toward the triplets. When the triplets heard this, their mouth unconsciously ticked up as they couldn't help but hum in response. Even if someone would tell them to fight with hundreds of wolves, they would be willing to do it. Asher, who heard this, couldn't help but pout after seeing that I seemed to trust them very much. "But I am an alpha too," he complained while pursing his lips while looking at me with a wrongful expression. I couldn't help but chuckle as I weakly raised my hand and ruffled his hair. "Be good and take a rest. Your sister is really fine. Just leave the fighting to the adults, and I'm sure that you already know how powerful these triplets are, even though they looked easygoing and go-with-the-flow type of a person." Asher didn't have much choice, but to nod his head, and as soon as he leaned his body on the wall, sitting on the same mat with his sister, he suddenly lost consciousness, making my breath almost hitch. It turned out that he had been fighting his urge to lose consciousness. It seemed that he feared that I might get hurt by our mother and would suffer a lot, which was why he tried his hardest to stay awake to guard me. I couldn't help but feel warm at the same time, felt like I was crushed by thousands of heavy emotions upon seeing him this way. I let him rest on my shoulder while waiting for the pack doctor to arrive. When I raised my head, in just a blink of an eye, the whip that Silda was holding tightly in her arms was suddenly caught by Ishid and stolen from her through force, which received a loud shriek from Silda as she went mad from anger, trying to get the whip from Ishid's hands. However, she didn't succeed because Drake was also there to prevent Silda from doing so. He blocked all of her attacks as if it was nothing, but what they did only made her become crazier. Her body slowly enlarged and her fur was starting to get visible all over her body. Her canine was even visible, and so were her sharp claws that looks like they could slash a human being to pieces. In a blink of an eye, Silda shifted her wolf form. She was growling while looking at Drake and Ishid with anger. It was like she wanted to tear them to pieces and became one of her greatest collections. The anticipation in her eyes couldn't be hidden or disguised. Tilda was the one who moved first. She swiftly jumped in the air and used her sharp claws to tear Drake's face by surprise, but Drake, who had already been on his guard, was able to dodge the attack. He formed a fist and threw a heavy punch on Silda's stomach, which she didn't have time to dodge, leading to her body being hit by the wall. The wall had become a spider web, especially after Silda's body was slammed on it, which proves how heavy Drake's punch is. Seeing it like that, I couldn't help but let out a sigh as I threw a sympathetic expression at my mother, who also experienced and suffered what I have suffered, especially since I was kicked by Drake in the past. I couldn't forget how painful it was after receiving his kick that immediately let my body be thrown away so easily, even though I'm a bit heavier than other girls. "Passed out?" I softly asked. But the three of them heard me clearly, and they all nodded in unison. This time she passed out. "We will cuff her first to make sure that she won't ever hurt you again and wait for the police to arrive so that we could hand this auntie. Are you okay with that?" They all looked at me with inquiring eyes. It was as if they were asking for my opinion on whether I should put her behind the cell. After all, she was our mother, and maybe this triplet thinks that I might get upset or sad about the thought that my mother was sent behind the bars. Without hesitation, I nodded my head. "Send her. She's not our mother anymore. She never sees us as her child, but rather as a venting machine where she could use violence to vent her emotions towards us. It doesn't matter what's going to happen with her." Hearing my words, they immediately sigh in relief and plan to make this auntie live her whole life behind the bars for all the things she had ever done. Within just a few minutes of waiting, the city police had already arrived and arrested Silda, who was unconscious after receiving a heavy blow from Drake. Drake was also the one who took the initiative to explain to the city police officer the crimes that Silda had committed, one by one. I even saw how the police officer's face change every time Drake would open his mouth and utter the crimes that Silda had committed one by one. From pity to anger, they left with an expression clearly saying "deserved" towards Silda, who was unconscious. Then they turned their eyes on us and looked at us, with Asher, with pity. After a while, the pack doctors arrived and immediately moved their asses to treat me and Asher. When I saw that they were going to treat me first, I immediately declined. "Please treat my brother first. I can still hold on for a little longer. However, my brother can't, even though he's a wolf, had great self-healing ability," I immediately said to the pack doctors. My words receive a worry at the same time, unwillingness from the eyes of the triplets. But what could they do? They can't raise their opinion and force me to receive the treatment first. So even if they were reluctant, they told the pack doctors to treat Asher first. After seeing my brother being treated with care and his complexion becoming rosier, I let out a sigh of relief. Then before it was my turn to be treated, especially since I had been enduring this hellish pain, because, wolves like my brother, I am a human, and I don't have a self-healing ability, which proves that I could only grit my teeth and endure it. I glanced at Lawrence and softly murmured in a low tone, which is enough for him to hear. I think I'm going to lose consciousness. I can't handle it anymore. Make sure to take care of my brother while I'm unconscious, okay? I softly said, and my words were also heard by the two, which made them look at me surprised, especially when they caught me in their arms after seeing me slowly losing the control and strength of my body. It wasn't until I was completely swallowed by a large black hole. We immediately watched Yunifer after we saw her lose consciousness. After that, we looked at the packed doctors with worries and panic visible in our eyes. "Hurry up and treat her," we both said in unison while urging the doctor. The doctor took out something like anesthesia and injected it into Yunifer, and before the surgery, they looked at us with a sigh. "Please help us send her to the hospital along with her brother, since I'm sure that she doesn't want to be separated from her brother," the pack doctor said calmly. Hearing this, we immediately reacted. I was the one who carried Yunifer, while Drake was the one who carried Asher. Both of them were unconscious. After we arrived at the hospital, the private hospital of our pack doctors, they already performed surgery on Yunifer while Asher was resting in the other room, since other than his wound had already been cleaned up by the doctors, it was also starting to get healed slowly on its own. While Yunifer was different because she's a human and humans are fragile. They get hurt easily, especially since they don't have the same self-healing ability as other high-ranking wolves, especially the alphas like us. "Will she be okay?" Ishid, on the other side of the white chair, asked while biting his nails, looking nervous while waiting for the pack doctors to come out from the room where they treated Yunifer. Drake, on the other hand, was calmer than us. He nodded his head and answered with certainty. "She will be okay. She's strong." Yunifer's POV. I was woken up by the sunlight that hit my face, making me grunt as I slowly opened my eyes. The first thing that I saw was the white ceiling, and even the walls were white. As soon as I saw this scene, I already have a general idea of where I am right now. I was in the hospital because I was wounded. Right, what about Asher? I immediately sat on my hospital bed and was about to climb off from my bed when the door opened and the triplets saw that I was about to rush my way towards the other room. After seeing that I was about to get off my bed, they rushed in my direction to stop me. Guessing that I was worried about Asher, they hurriedly explained. "Asher is fine. The wound on his back was already healed, and he was still sleeping right now. Last night, when you were sleeping, he visited you and wanted to stay with you, but the doctor led him back to his room to let him rest first, even if the wound on his back was healed." Hearing this, I was relieved and obediently let them help me lay down on the bed. Lawrence then looked at me with worries in his eyes. "How are you feeling right now? You've been in a coma for 3 days, which was why Asher and the three of us couldn't help but feel worried about your condition." Ishid also solemnly nodded his head. "But who would have thought that the first thing that we saw after you woke up was that you were trying to get off the bed in a hurry without even minding the IV drip on your left side?" Even Drake, who remained quiet, couldn't help but voice out his words. "That's right. You should treasure yourself more, and if you have something that you want to know or do, just tell us because we are willing to do anything for you." When I saw how solemn they are, I couldn't help but tease them. "Are you sure that it's not for Samantha?" I asked with a joking tone. I saw the way their faces changed as they rolled their eyes and shook their heads. "It's not, and it will never be. Stop thinking about her and focus on us instead." Hearing this, I don't know why, but I was slightly relieved that they don't value Samantha as much as how they valued me. I don't know whether to laugh or cry about my situation, especially since I couldn't hide my feelings for them anymore. Anyway, it was a good feeling that I was being cared for. This is good. I hope this will last. "Are you okay now?" "Your wound?" Lawrence asked while looking at me with full worry. I looked at him and smiled while shaking my head. "It's fine now, it didn't hurt anymore. If it wasn't for the bandage around my back, I would show it you that it's already fine." I even felt that it was already healed with no scars. Indeed, it was really weird since I felt that I became better. The wound, which was terrifyingly large and was burning from the paints, already healed. I felt that it was all just my illusion that I received a wound from being whipped by my mother. I should check my wound later to see if it was wound. I'm starting to doubt myself. Just like my brother who had a self-healing ability, I felt like I was also the same as him, but only a bit inferior because my wound won't heal immediately, just like him. However, compared to normal humans, my wound healed much faster than theirs without even leaving scars or traces. Is it because my mother is a wolf, even though I was born as a human? I couldn't completely be a human because I have a werewolf mother, so I inherited a bit of my mother's self-healing ability, right? In the end, no one could answer my doubts. I helplessly shrugged my shoulder and stopped thinking about it. Then I looked at them and asked, "Since I was in a coma for 3 days, what about school? Did you excuse me from our dean and professor?" Ishid nodded his head and answered, "Yes. We already excused you, so you don't have to worry. You can just catch up with the activities and quizzes given by your professor." "Thank you," I sincerely said as I smiled at them from the bottom of my heart. They looked away and faked their cough. "There's no need for thanks between us," they said while holding back their smiles. Suddenly, the door creaked, making us look in its direction. It was Asher who carefully opened the door and secretly glanced at me. Upon seeing me regain my consciousness, his eyes lit up and rushed his way in my direction. He climbed the bed swiftly with agility and threw himself into my arms, making me chuckle. Then he realized something and immediately retracted himself from hugging me. I'm sorry," he apologized as he looked at me carefully, as if he was inspecting if my wound reopened after he rushed his way toward my embrace. Seeing him being like this, I grabbed his small body and hugged him tightly. "No need. I'm already fine and my wound has already been healed, so there's no need for you to get worried about it," I softly said while combing his hair with my fingers. Asher nodded his head as he buried his face in my chest as he murmured, "It's good to hear that you're fine. How about my dearest brother? Are you okay now? Is your wound fully healed? No skin traumas? What about mental traumas? Are you fine now?" I asked while inspecting him carefully. Asher shook his head while he was still hugging me. "No, I'm fine. No skin traumas nor mental traumas." "Are you sure?" I raised my brows while eyeing him who was clinging to me tightly like a koala. Asher nodded his head and softly murmured, "I'm fine now. After all, I'll be okay once you're okay." I couldn't help but chuckle at his sweet words. I helplessly pinched his cheeks as I glanced at the triplets who were staring at Asher, and I happened to see their envious look. When they felt my gaze, they hastily averted their gaze at Asher and erased the envious look they have on their faces as they gave me a big and warm smile. "You two are close," Ishid couldn't help but mutter, and the way he said those words were filled with envy. I smiled at him and nodded my head. "Yeah, Asher and I are very close since we are siblings, and we only rely on ourselves ever since our mother started to use her hands and feet to beat us. We were the only ones who could rely on ourselves, so we are much closer to each other and are dependent on each other." I saw Drake's brows furrowed, Lawrence, who clenched his jaw, and Ishid, who suddenly became serious, all start to look at me. "What?" I asked while raising my brows at them, and at the same time, I was sliding my fingers through Asher's hair, whose face was still buried in my chest, not letting me go. Even though Asher said that he was mentally fine and there were no traumas he received from what happened 3 days ago, I could tell that he had suffered from nightmares. He was trying to hide it so that I won't get worried, but deep down inside he was suffering from the nightmares that kept on hunting him. It must be all about Mother. No one in this world could properly put a trauma and pulled the trigger of our trauma other than our mother. Suddenly, I heard Lawrence's voice, who asked, "Did your mother abuse the two of you when you were still living in her household?" I don't know why, but Lawrence's usual voice was filled with gentleness and was now suddenly filled with a heavy and hoarse voice. He seemed to be gritting his teeth. But I acted like there was nothing wrong with it, and honestly told them the truth with calmness since I wasn't planning on hiding this from them, and I don't think there was something wrong in telling them about it, especially since they already saw the way our mother became like a madman and crazily whipped us with a whip. Yeah, I've experienced being abused by her for several years, ever since my father died. Not only that, but she also abused Asher. We've suffered a lot from her hands, and we feared her the most every time we are inside her household. Whenever she would come back, we would immediately hide for our mother not see us, and be used as her venting machine, where she could freely vent all of her frustrations and emotions through violence. After I said that, my eyesight unconsciously glanced at Asher and softly patted his back. His breath was even, and his eyes were closed. He was resting his small body on me while he still didn't let go of me. It was as if I could make him secure. There was even a visible dark circle underneath his eyes, clearly telling that he never had a proper and good rest. He was suffering from nightmares. Suddenly, I heard a bang coming from their direction, making me raise my head and look at them. It was none other than Drake, whose face was darkened as he crushed the tin can that was in his hand. I tilted my head and looked at Drake with curiosity. Even Ishid and Lawrence's faces were so dark that it almost seemed that they wanted to murder someone. Drake's POV. When I heard that our mate suffered from abuse for several years, I felt like being petrified, and it was as if a force just pierced my heart. I'm sure that it wasn't only me who felt this way. Even the twins, Ishid and Lawrence, also felt the same way that I feel after our mate suffered from her household. When I remembered the way I kicked her for no reason on our first day, I suddenly wanted to go back to the past and meet my past self, then beat him to a pulp for doing that to our mate. I clenched my jaw and I could feel the veins on my forehead throbbing. "No one tried to save you?" I hoarsely asked while staring at her. She doesn't have an expression on her face when she said that she was abused by her mother for several years, other than being calm. It was as if she was telling someone else's story. Or maybe it did become someone else's story, because in the past, she was the daughter of the abuser who abused her, but now she had nothing to do with that abuser anymore. The abuser had no significance in her life. Yunifer turned to look at me and retorted, "Otherwise, I won't have to endure all of Silda's abuse. Besides, even if someone took the initiative to help me that time to get me out of that household, I wouldn't still get out. Why?" All of us, I, Ishid, and Lawrence, asked in unison as our brows furrowed, clearly disagreeing with her words. Yunifer let out a soft chuckle as her eyes glanced at Asher, who was sleeping in her embrace. "Because Silda used my beloved brother to threaten me. If I dared to disobey or make her unhappy, Asher would receive punishment. That's why when I saw that she would beat Asher, I begged her to beat me instead. Treat me as her venting machine rather than beating my Asher." I couldn't help but clench my fist as I gnashed my teeth in anger. I didn't even notice that my canines were visible and my eye color slowly changed. I could even feel the anger of my wolf, Alistair. "Kill! Kill that damned Silda who made our Luna suffer for several years." The more I think about it, the angrier I feel. Yunifer's POV. Looking at Asher, who kept on rumbling and kept on repeating the words that I said about how I hated the triplets before, to the point that I didn't even want to breathe the same air with them. My cheeks heat up whenever he brings it up, and I couldn't help but let out a shallow laugh while pinching his cheeks. Argus made an aggrieved look. "You clearly hated them before, but look at you now. You are even willing to wait for them. Tsk, you should take good care of your heart, or else you will experience pain if they hurt you. From what I read in the book, love could make someone become a fool, so I'm hoping you won't be a fool when it comes to love." When I heard him nag, acting like a mature middle-aged man who was lecturing someone like me, made me chuckle. He looked cute acting like this. I know. I would watch out for my heart and make sure to protect it so that no one can hurt it. I softly said while rubbing his head. After he heard my words, he let out a relieved sigh and nodded his head in solemnity. Just when he was about to open his mouth and continue to give me some of his nags when we heard such a familiar voice. "What do you mean by watch out for your heart? What are you watching for?" When we looked back, it was none other than Lawrence, who was smiling gently like a holy father, and his smiles were filled with brilliance, which almost blinded us with the halo light he emits. Asher and I both have the fake smile that appeared on our lips as we rolled our eyes, didn't even dare to continue looking at this Holy Father, or else we would be blinded by his smiles. Hearing his question, I cleared my throat and answered, "It was nothing. We were just joking while waiting for the three of you to arrive. But now that you are already here, let's go now." I deliberately made my voice higher so that they could hear the words that I said, which were deprived of the original topic, which is what I originally intended to do. Otherwise, they would continue to ask about what my heart was watching out for. Anyway, it would be embarrassing to tell them about it, especially since they don't even say that they like me, even though they sleep with me. I don't want to be delusional just because they were sweet and kind towards me, especially since I could still remember how they rejected me as their Luna. I don't want to raise my hopes high because I know that I would just be disappointed. The more I put my hopes high, the more cruel and painful it is when I fall. I can't deny that I like them, that I love them. But I still prefer to grit my teeth and bite my lips so that I won't utter those words that my heart has been rejoicing and wanting to say to them. I don't want to get disappointed. Besides, I know that if I would confess my feelings to them, they might reject me again, the same way that they rejected me as their Luna. I don't want us to be awkward with each other, and I want them to be with me just like what they are doing right now. Confessing to them would only lead to our relationship right now being awkward and distant. I don't want that to happen. That's why I decided to keep these feelings hidden inside of my heart and pretend that I don't like them, and only like them as a friend. I raised my head and looked at Lawrence, who was looking at me with curiosity. "It was nothing. What are you looking at me like that for? Anyway, we will enjoy our day today. Our destination is the amusement park," I enthusiastically said while looking at them full of smiles. When Asher heard the word amusement park, his eyes sparkled as he made a little jump while looking at us with excitement. "Let's go! Go! Go!" He kept on chanting while eagerly looking at us. Even Lawrence and the others who seemed to want to ask something couldn't help but feel helpless against the enthusiastic Asher, who kept on urging them to go to the amusement park right now. Drake helplessly nodded his head and gestured for us to go inside their van. "Let's go now," Drake said while looking at Asher. Then he also glanced at me, making me flinch as I could hear the thump of my heart. Yet I still gave him a calm smile and tried to act as if nothing happened, act as if I didn't hear the turmoil of my heart. Asher and I went inside their van, and it was Ishid who was driving the van. While we were inside the van, I saw Asher, who was humming and his legs were swaying while he was full of smiles. He was excited and couldn't wait to go and play in the amusement park. Seeing him in a good mood, I couldn't help but be chuckled, and the corner of my mouth had been raised. "Good mood?" Drake asked in a low tone while looking at me. Hearing this, I turned my head and looked at him. I gave him my sweetest smile, which almost took him back. "Of course, I am. My brother is in a good mood, so I am too," Lawrence also chuckled. "It was a good thing that you are happy. After all, we are also happy if you are happy." My heart thumped even faster upon hearing his soft voice next to my ear, which made me ticklish. I felt my blood rise from my cheeks upon the way he said those words, as if he was whispering to his lover. Lover. It was such a pleasant thing to name as their lover. But maybe I could only experience being their lover in my illusion. The illusion of them accepting me as their Luna. Although I loved them and was willing to be with them, but just like what Asher said, I don't want to become a fool just because of love. I won't make myself desperate just to get their attention and use tactic tricks to make them mine. I would much rather them look at me like a friend or just a stranger, rather than let them look at me with disgust or hate. After all, love can't be forced. We can't force someone to like us back, just as the way we can't force ourselves to love someone whom we can't give our love. Although I wanted to become their Luna badly, I don't want to ruin the relationship that we have now just because of my feelings. I looked at Lawrence and gave him my sweetest smile. "Then I'll make sure that I will be happy every day so that you would also be happy." Lawrence stared at me for a minute before he averted his gaze. He hummed and softly touched the back of my head, carefully rubbing my hair and patting it. Yeah, you should remember it. His voice sounded hoarse when he answered. The whole van sounded silent. Only Asher's hum could be heard. I don't know why, but I suddenly have a bad premonition in my heart. I looked at them and raised my brows. Why do the three of you seem so weird? The three of them who heard my words immediately shook their heads in answer. It was nothing. Anyway, let's enjoy this day. Ishid tried to make his voice hyper, which made me frown. The way that they were acting now sounded so weird and too confusing. I couldn't help but doubt them, but after hearing that we should enjoy the day today, I let go of my doubts for now. Anyway, today's day is precious, so I have to set aside my doubts for them for now and enjoy this day. When the van stopped moving, Asher's eyes lit up as he looked at me with excitement while his fingers were pointing at the colorful amusement park that was on the outside. Amusement park! Asher excitedly said the two words, making me chuckle as I helped him open the sliding door of the van, and we both got out along with Lawrence and Drake. Only Ishid was left in the van because he still need to park the van, and he will catch up later. Although this was Asher's first time going into the amusement park all of my life, it was also the same with me. After all, I was either locked in Silda's house or working in RT time. There were no days that I was free to do whatever I want without being watched by her. Now, seeing the amusement park was also like healing my inner child. Asher excitedly held my hand as he dragged me to the stole. Then we roamed around together, the triplets, while holding cotton candy in our hands that we bought earlier because of Asher's enthusiastic words. After that, the five of us decided to give the roller coaster a try, and before we entered, the trio looked at us with hesitant. Are you sure you want to go? They looked at us with worry, making me look at them with teasing gaze, thinking that they might be afraid and reluctant to ride the roller coaster. I patted their shoulder and looked at them with a smile while my eyes were telling them, I understand, as I opened my mouth to console them. No worries, I won't tell anyone that the three of you were afraid to ride the roller coaster. Why don't you three just wait for us to come back? I said while carefully looking at their expression. After all, for sure that these alphas don't want to lose their face, so I said those words carefully and softly without looking down at them. After all, we have our capacities as well as weaknesses. It is already part of our nature. However, the three of them had stoic expressions and they looked petrified after hearing my words. The three of them looked at me before they decisively shook their head. No, we are not afraid of that roller coaster thing. We are just afraid that you might feel scared or unwell. They explained, making me look at them with suspicion. Seeing me looking at them like that, they sighed helplessly. Fine, let's go and ride that damn thing. We will prove to you that not even a war could shake us. The three of them solemnly said as they went inside the roller coaster. Of course, we and Asher followed. A few moments later, fuck, hell, shit, and so on was the only thing that I could hear from their mouth as I watched them vomit. The so-called alphas were pale after they ride the roller coaster. From time to time, their stomach would churn up whenever they remember the feeling of going up and down in the air earlier, which made them vomit their insides. Watching them like this, I felt helpless and even brought them hot water. Each one of them immediately accepts before they could drink it in one gulp. I stopped them. Drink slowly, that's hot. I reminded them while looking at the pale face of the three. I feel slightly distressed seeing them like this. After all, they looked determined and confident when they entered the roller coaster. They even boasted that nothing can shake this, but look at these alphas now. They looked tired and fragile. When I look at Asher, who seemed to be enthusiastic and still want to play, I looked at the three and hesitantly said to them, Why not the three of you wait here on the bench while I take Asher around the amusement park to have his fun? I said, making them tiredly raise their head and shook. No, we will be fine. Just let us sit for a few minutes and we will be good to go. They said, then they looked at Asher as if they were asking for his permission. Can we? Hearing this, Asher was hesitant at first, but after seeing their pale faces, he sighed and nodded his head. Fine then. I'll just eat while waiting for the three of you to be fine, alphas. The three of them couldn't help but feel embarrassed after Asher let them remember their title. While waiting for them, I couldn't help but let out a sigh. Who would have thought that they were really weak when it comes to roller coasters? As expected, there was no such thing as perfect in the world. Anyway, I will still love them even if they have flaws. Yunifer's Pove. We've been playing around for an hour. We tried different kinds of play and even the haunted house game. We tried it. Even though we know that ghosts don't exist, we couldn't help but scream whenever they appeared in front of us. Even Drake almost punched the ghosts that tried to scare him right in front of his face. Meanwhile, Ishid was hiding behind me, and from time to time, his voice would reach a high note whenever the ghosts appeared. While Asher was holding my hand tightly, and he would just look away at the sigh of the ghosts. Lawrence was just the one who was calm along the way. He would give the ghosts a gentle smile and politely look away at them, making the ghosts' blood almost spurt out as they turned away from him to scare the others. Otherwise, their heart would beat fast upon seeing Lawrence. I couldn't help but chuckle upon seeing them like this. Drake uses violence, Ishid uses his high note, and Lawrence activates his halo light Holy Father. Again, through this, I learned something new about them which made me happy too. Upon seeing the light at the end of the haunted house, everyone let out a relieved sigh, including me. Even Ishid couldn't wait to get out of this haunted house. By the time that we got out of the haunted house, our eyes squinted when they meet the light, and it took us time to adjust our eyes. Then I looked at Drake, who was cursing while his eyes were inside the haunted house. We could even hear the sound of screaming from the inside. I don't know why people liked going inside there, knowing that it was such a scary thing, Drake said as he clicked his tongue. I helplessly chuckled and also glanced at the people who were lining up for the haunted house. Well, they want a thrill in their life. Even I also liked going inside after I experienced it once. Lawrence gently smiled and he nodded his head. Indeed, it was a new experience. It was kind of fun, and besides, the production did their best to make that event. Ishid was still filled with tears while his hand was holding Drake's arm. It was too scary, he uttered with a choking tone. Lawrence glanced at him and answered, "They are not real, you know." Ishid glanced at Lawrence and gave him roll eyes. Even so, I couldn't still help but feel scared and shocked whenever they appeared right in front of me. They are too ugly. Seeing him whining, I couldn't help but chuckle. Let's go to the food stall and eat. We're hungry. After I mentioned the word hungry, they also feel their stomach and went along with me to go to the food stall to eat. While eating and drinking soda at the same time, our eyes would occasionally glance at the beautiful scenery in the park. It was too mesmerizing to look at that we suddenly forgot all of the troubles and sorrows that we were enduring deep down inside. I wish for the time to stop. Such a beautiful scene that I don't want to end. I softly murmured while letting out a heavy sigh. Drake, who was near beside me, was able to hear my murmur. He nodded his head and hummed in agreement. Indeed, it was too beautiful to look at, and I admit that this could be the best and wonder memories that I carefully stored inside of my heart. Drake softly whispered in my ears, making me tremble a bit when his breath touched my sensitive ears. Indeed, I softly whispered as I moved back a bit while trying to calm my heart. I looked at him and smiled sweetly. Since we can't stop time, we'll just have to do our best to enjoy our day today so that it will leave a deep imprint in our hearts. Wouldn't that be good? Lawrence and Ishid also heard what I said, and they also cheerfully nodded their heads after hearing my words. That's right! We don't know if we can experience this kind of fun in the future, so we have to enjoy it to the fullest. Ishid exclaimed with a bright smile, appeared on his lips, as he rushed towards another food stall to try another food. We helplessly followed him and tried various kinds of food that were offered. Then we tried different kinds of rides like bumpy car rides. Then right after we also tried the carousel ride that made us feel like a child. And then right after, we also rode the Ferris wheel. I never had been in such a good mood where I could relax and let my guard down. This was the first time I laughed wholeheartedly without caring about tomorrow and yesterday. I never thought that there would be a day when I would feel this way. It was such a wonderful feeling that I wanted to keep it inside of my heart and lock it so that these feelings won't escape. When I looked at the triplets, they were also like me. They have smiles on their stoic faces, and they looked relaxed while we were going up into the sky. Let's go back here again in the future. It was Lawrence who softly proposed with a smile on his face, making me smile at him too. I softly nodded my head. Let's go back here again. I hope that we can still visit here again together, especially since it seemed like the one who wanted to capture me won't get rest until he caught me in his arms. I don't know what they wanted from me, but all I know is that their intentions for me aren't that good. Besides, I looked up and glanced at the trio and saw the restlessness in their eyes. It was as if they were hesitant to open their mouths and tell me, which made my brows furrow as I couldn't help but doubt them. What the hell is going on with them? What are they hiding from me? They are too suspicious that it made me overthink things. However, even if I would say anything and ask them about it, I'm sure that they won't tell me about it, given the way they seem to be reluctant to say anything to me, even though it feels like it was related to me. In the end, I decided to shut my mouth for the better. It would be better that way so that our relationship would not be awkward, or that I would not ruin the good atmosphere we have now. After we rode the Ferris wheel, the four of them decided to sit on the bench while I was the one who volunteered to buy some bottles of minerals, because the trio was a bit dizzy while Asher was too tired to walk. Since I was a little bit fine between the four of them, I walked towards the stall of the vendor who sells bottles of minerals. Just when I was about to open my mouth to buy from the vendor, when suddenly I felt a handkerchief covering my mouth tightly, and even if I want to scream, I couldn't do so. I tried to kick him or struggle to break free from him, but my whole body felt jelly. I was weakened and my head was dizzy, and even my ears were buzzy. I was trying hard to fight back my sleepiness to regain my posture and consciousness. However, I ended up being defeated. I helplessly tried to open my eyes, but my vision started to blur. I could feel my body being secretly held by the crowd. No one could see those actions just now, because they were swift, fast, and precise with their target. They immediately wrapped their hands around my waist as if they were trying to make me look tired or drunk in the eyes of others, so the actions they didn't arouse commotion or doubts from the crowd. I bit my lower lip to the point that I could even taste the metallic taste, trying hard to not fall asleep. It wasn't until I felt someone chop my nape, making my eyeball roll up, that my consciousness was wrapped by the abyss. The only last thing I heard was their voice that was filled with joy while they were talking to each other and can't wait to tell their alpha that they succeeded in the mission. Ishid's Povi. I felt my stomach churn up, and I even felt dizzy from trying to experience different kinds of rides in the amusement park. Although it was enjoyable most of all, it was hell. I feel like I want to vomit. I feel like I want to sleep on my bed for a day. My wolf, Kyle, suddenly snorted. "You're too weak. You humans are too weak. You should have let me take over so that I can be the one who will experience it with my mate." I hissed and answered him back in my consciousness. "No way. I was also having fun being with my mate." Kyle snickered, and his voice was filled with sarcasm. "How dare you say that you wanted Yunifer to be your mate, especially since the three of you were planning to accept Samantha as your mate? I'm telling you, I'm against that plan." I immediately shook my head and rolled my eyes at Kyle, throwing tantrums. "I have already explained to you 100 times that we won't accept Samantha as our mate. Rather, we will just act like we were going to accept her once we will mate in front of the Alpha King, my father. Then after that, we will get rid of her. I told you that we need to act this way because that father of mine would surely do something against our Luna." I couldn't help but shout at my wolf upon saying those words. I'm sure that it wasn't just me who was reluctant and hated this plan, but what else could we do? It's not like we can fight with our father, and besides, it is very easy to get rid of Samantha, so we choose this way. Anyway, we will protect Yunifer if we act like Samantha became our Luna. We will only do this to please that old man so that he would stop from trying to capture our Luna and stop him from planning on whatever he has planned right now against Yunifer. He only wants to have Samantha be our mate and not the human Yunifer, right? Then we will pretend to do it. I let out a heavy sigh whenever I thought of the way our father hated humans very much. It was because our mother was also a human and was killed. I heard that the love story of the father and mother was a complicated one. It seemed like the father had a one-sided love for the mother, while the mother loved someone whom she can't be with, especially since she suddenly found out she was someone's Luna. I heard it was that kind of love story that they have, and my father seemed to be obsessed with my mother. Anyway, it was a chaotic one, and we never really asked Father about it, since ever since we were children, he never told us about it. It was only our nannies who told us about them. I let out a heavy sigh and was about to continue to speak in my mind when I heard Lawrence's voice that was filled with doubt. It has been 15 minutes since Yunifer went to buy a bottle of minerals, but until now, she didn't come back. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid or what, but something is wrong. She should be supposed to be here now, but... Lawrence's voice trailed as he bit his lower lip. His brows were furrowed as he was fidgeting. The rest of us immediately stood up as we tried to find Yunifer. However, there was no Yunifer who was buying a bottle of minerals from the drinks vendor, Lawrence's Pavie. I pursed my lips as my heart was in turmoil. I couldn't help but feel anxious upon the thought that Yunifer can't be found. I was so anxious that I couldn't even maintain my hard-earned gentle persona as I kept frowning while looking around the crowd trying to find Yunifer. Even Drake went to the Lost and Found Center just to announce Yunifer's name. Calling the attention of Yunifer Sarmiento, your family is waiting for you on the bench. Those announcements had been repeated 3 times, but there was still no Yunifer who planned to meet them on the bench. Even Asher, who should act mature when facing Yunifer, was now trembling like a lost child and crying. I lightly patted his head and looked at him, who was wiping his tears along with his snot. Don't worry, we will find your sister. We promise you that we won't stop until we can find her. Asher's long lashes fluttered as he raised his head while looking at me with nervousness. Really? You'll find her? I nodded my head and answered with solemnity. I will. I promise you that I will find her no matter what. Drake and Ishid had already called out subordinates, and they would help us to find Yunifer. When Asher heard this, he let out a sigh of relief and continued wiping his eyes that were swollen from crying. Then you should hurry up and find her, otherwise something bad would happen to her. I don't know why those bad guys keep coming on us, especially coming to my sister. If only I was stronger, I would have the ability to protect her, so that this type of thing won't happen. But I am just a kid. I can't do anything with my small body. Hearing his reasoning, I smiled and patted his head. That's why you have to leave it to the adults. Leave this matter to the adults. We will promise you to find your sister as fast as we can. Just for a while, Ishid came back with a drench looking and excessively panting. It seemed that he roamed around the amusement park trying to find Yunifer's trace. Did you find her? I asked with nervousness, while handing him a bottle of water. Ishid accepted it and unscrewed the bottle, then gulped the water down before he answered. No, there was no Yunifer in this amusement park. It seemed that she was taken away. The only trace that I found was her coin. After that, he took out the coin that he was holding, then he added, it seemed that Yunifer was trying to buy a bottle of minerals from the vendor, but it was stopped because she was dragged away. Hearing this, my brows furrowed. And then? Did you ask the vendor who sells the mineral water? Did they find out anything weird that could lead us to trace where Yunifer is? Ishid helplessly shook his head. No, there was none. I asked them, but they said they never saw someone who was suspicious looking. They also didn't see Yunifer. I gritted my teeth from anxiousness upon hearing him say that. I also glanced at Drake, who just appeared in front of us, and when he saw us looking at him with an expectant gaze, Drake also helplessly shook his head with a disappointed look. She's not here anymore. It seemed that the one who captured her was proficient in this kind of thing, and I'm sure that its backing was strong and had a high authority, even much higher than us. Drake said while looking with a heavy gaze. But who? I couldn't help but raise my voice from anger upon hearing his words. Who would have dared to capture Yunifer when she was with us? Samantha? Did that bitch just dare to order someone to hurt Yunifer just the way she did before? I will kill that bitch if she dared to touch even the single hair of Yunifer. It seemed that Drake was able to see through my thoughts, and he immediately shook his head. It wasn't Samantha. I'm sure that it wasn't her because I've contacted my spy and said that Samantha was grounded after going to a party and spending a night with countless boys in one night. I've been monitoring her and her family's move for fear that they might do something to Yunifer. Drake said while letting out a grunt. Asher, who was also listening to their conversation, couldn't help but feel anxious. But who? Who would capture my sister? Where is she now? Asher kept on asking while tears started to form under her eyes. I looked at him, who was already crying and his small body was trembling. I assured him, we will find her. Then after I coaxed Asher, I glanced at the two who also looked at me. It seemed that we were thinking the same thing. Do you think that it was our father who captured Yunifer? Other than Samantha, our father also wanted to capture Yunifer. I said while looking at them. Drake helplessly sighed and nodded his head. I know, but it was because our father doesn't want us to have a human Luna. That's why our father wanted to capture her. But now that we promised our father to not take a human Luna, he should have already stopped trying to capture her. If what you said was true, then our father shouldn't have any reasons to capture Yunifer. If he is the one who captured her, for what reason? It was Ishid, who rarely got his IQ fixed, was now taking things seriously and even gave his opinion. Lawrence and I also agreed with his words. Even though we are that old man's son, we could not guess what he was thinking all the time. He rarely even met with us other than commanding us about this and that and what should we do. Other than that, he would just go back to our mother's room and then spend his time there. He was so obsessed with our mother to the point that he would sometimes forget that he still has a son. He had 3 sons to be exact. That's why it was too hard to think that our father would do such a thing to Yunifer. Then Drake looked at us with seriousness and suggested, why not we investigate our father secretly? He might be the one who captured Yunifer. I know that we shouldn't doubt our father since we think that he doesn't have anything that could make him capture Yunifer. However, it's better to make sure than be sorry in the end. I and Ishid both nodded our heads after hearing his words. We'll command our spy to proceed. Drake solemnly nodded his head. We should act faster or else we would be too late. Yunifer's Pova. When I woke up, I felt sore all over. My whole body was aching, especially my nape. By the time I opened my eyes, I immediately raised my guard after seeing that I was brought to such an unfamiliar place. It was such an obsolete place, and I could even sense such a metallic smell all over. Just when I was about to plan to get off the bed, when I heard a clanging sound on my ankles, preventing me from escaping. It was a chain, a heavy, large chain wrapped tightly around my ankles. When I looked at what was in front of me, it wasn't a door, but rather it was a metallic bar. It seemed that I was being imprisoned, and this prison had a bed, which made me sigh in relief a little. Thank goodness that they were a bit considerate, otherwise I would fall in despair if they would just let me lie down on this cold, dusty, and dirty floor. I was kidnapped. Before I was captured, I was trying to buy a bottle of water. Speaking of which, I'm sure that Asher would be worried that I was gone for too long. Maybe those trio would also be worried about me and try to find me too. Asher. I hope that the trio would take care of him and coax him, especially so that he won't stop crying if he knows that I was gone for too long. After all, Asher had been dependent on me. I pursed my lips as I clenched my fist. I wanted to escape from here and go back. I can't stay here for a little longer. Just when I was about to forcefully take off the chain that binds my ankle, when suddenly I heard the rusty sound of the cell, opening which made me raise my guard as I looked at the person who visit. It was a man who was probably in his 40s. He was tall and chubby. He had a lot of tattoos on his body, and he was even smoking right in front of me. The first thing that comes to my mind was that this person is a gangster. He should be no up good. Was this person the one who captured me? I looked at him with vigilance and asked, "What do you want from me? Money? I can give you money if you want. Just let me out of here." The gangster, who was filled with tattoos on his body, snickered as he put off the cigarette butt with his shoes. "Money, I have a lot of those, and I don't need yours." "Then what do you want?" I coldly asked while glaring at this man. The gangster suddenly took out a whip from his behind and showed it to me. A perverted grin flashed on his lips, making me shiver instantly. "Of course, the boss told us to make you see your place and to teach you a lesson. You see, our boss is a ruthless one, so I have to obey his command well. Please forgive my impoliteness." After the fatty gangster said that, he whipped me hard, making my body jolt as I turned my back and protect my head. I groaned and screamed from the pain as I took the lashes. It was too painful to the point that I wanted to pass out. My head was buzzing from the pain and I felt suffocated by his excessive whip. It wasn't until my consciousness was starting to drift that the fatty gangster stops from whipping me, which made my body slump in the bed, disregarding the thick, bloody smell that I emitted. I heard the fatty gangster snicker and said without a hint of sympathy, "You shouldn't have provoked the boss, especially since the boss had a ruthless personality from the bones. Anyway, you should stop dreaming that you will be the boss's son's Luna, since someone will be their Luna." After he said that, he walked out of the cell and locked it before he went away. My head was buzzing and I could feel that my world was spinning. I felt I became deaf after hearing the latter of the fatty gangster's words. How come I heard such nonsense? I tried to laugh, but I couldn't. I tried to dismiss what he said, but the words that he said kept on repeating like a broken radio in my mind. The trio accepted someone else to be their Luna, and it wasn't me? It was much more painful to bear than the lashes that I endured just now. 10 times being whipped couldn't even match how suffocating I was feeling right now. Plus, it was the trio's father who kidnapped me and put me in this situation. Did the trio know that it was their father who was planning to take my life, or were they their father's conspiracies? So what about their gestures, their smiles, their moves, and the way they cared about me? Was it just my illusion? Was I just overthinking things? Was I just being delusional, thinking that they also liked me, and maybe, even if it's just a little bit, they also wanted me to be their Luna? But here I am, receiving such news that they were planning to take someone to be their Luna, and it wasn't me. A hint of mockery flashed on my lips. I couldn't contain my laughter and didn't stop laughing till I got choked by my tears. Damn, it fucking hurts as hell. I don't want this feeling anymore. Why is loving so hard? I just want to love and be loved. But it was also my fault too. I put too much effort to love someone who already rejected me. They already rejected me from the beginning, and I shouldn't have hoped for too much. I was such a fool. Warning: suicide. Third-person POV. It has been Yunifer's second day of being tortured. She suffered from mental and physical torture. Day by day, hours by hours, she endured all the beating and their lectures towards her. But if this would kept up, Yunifer thinks she would die. The abuser would always remind her how jinxed she is and how unworthy she is to be deserved by the love of the triplets alphas, how unworthy she is to be their Luna. They kept on reminding her again and again about how the triplets already chose their Luna, which is Samantha. The abuser, who was wearing baggy pants and had scars on his face, smirked as he kicked the bloody stomach of Yunifer, who was lifelessly lying on the bed that was dyed with her blood. "You're a pitiful one. I don't know how you angered the Alpha King, but I don't have a choice but to continue doing this to you. Our Alpha King told me to make you suffer to the point that you don't want to live. It seems that he had a grudge against you." The man, who had scars on his face, sneered as he continued beating him. Yunifer, who doesn't have the strength to defend herself, lets the man continue beating her. Her eyes were already lifelessly staring at the ceiling, and no one could tell what she was thinking. There would be no groan, no scream, and no begging that would come out from her mouth every time they would beat her. It was as if she had already turned into a lifeless machine. She just let them beat her to a pulp. She felt numb all over. Because the pain was too painful for her to bear, her brain activates the mechanisms to block her pain and turns her into a numb person. "Kill me, please." There was no emotion in her mouth when she said those words. However, it seemed that the man who has scars on his face was already used to hearing those words from this lifeless woman named Yunifer. He just sneered and continued beating her. Yunifer's eyes, which sparkled like a gem, suddenly lost their brightness, as if everything was already dark, as if everyone had already turned their back on her. It was unbearable for her to continue lying down helplessly in this prison cell. She also doesn't know how she provoked the Alpha King. She wanted to know, but the Alpha King won't meet her and just used his subjects to beat her until she wants to die. If that was what he wanted all this time, then he had already succeeded. After all, in this type of situation, who would want to live? Yunifer doesn't want to live anymore. She wants to die. No one would save her, nor can save her other than herself. She thinks she can't do it anymore. She's already tired and wants to rest. Even if her body produced a self-healing ability that is very different from an ordinary human, that doesn't mean that the pain she suffered at the hands of the abuser wouldn't affect her mentality. Day by day, she started to hate herself for being weak. She hated herself for being helpless in this situation. If this would continue, Yunifer won't be able to take this anymore. She's tired. She wants to rest. She's grown tired of being numb from the pain. She doesn't know herself anymore. The pain made her blank out of her mind. If this would continue, she'd rather die. If this would continue, she'd rather all these things end. Yunifer lifelessly glanced at the abuser who was kicking her, and kept on repeating that it wasn't his fault and it was the Alpha King who commanded him to do this kind of thing to her. But the abuser's eyes can't lie. His eyes were dazzled and filled with a sense of excitement every time he kicked her. "Kill me?" Yunifer lifelessly added again while staring at the abuser, who kept on beating her with a sense of accomplishment and excitement. However, the abuser just merely looked at Yunifer and snickered. Suddenly, Yunifer seemed to have long lost hope from being killed by the others. Her eyes became bright when she thought of something. "If you can't kill me, then I'll just have to kill myself." A smile appeared on Yunifer's lifeless face, making the abuser who saw this have the hunch that something is not right. However, he was already a step ahead late when she saw Yunifer take out the shred of glass that they used to slam on her head. And who would have thought that Yunifer had hidden one of the shreds of glass underneath her pillow? The abuser helplessly watched Yunifer slit her wrist and let her blood flow out of her body like a river. You. The abuser looked at her with widened eyes and couldn't continue speaking, especially when Yunifer put down the glass. She peacefully lay on the bed, completely disregarding the stink of the blood. There was even a hint of peacefulness on her face. When she closed her eyes, a curve appeared on her lips, making her warm yet melancholy. Seeing her like this, the abuser felt this picture was too mesmerizing if you only disregarded the blood. It wasn't until the abuser had completely drawn out of his illusion that he started to panic, especially since the Alpha King specifically said that they shouldn't let Yunifer die. Yet he just helplessly watched Yunifer slit her wrist and died. Ishid's Pov. I let out a curse as I glanced at Drake, whose jaw was clenched, and there were even veins that were throbbing appeared on his forehead. It was a father who captured Yunifer. He already found out that we are investigating him, that's why he killed all of our spies. We've tried everything we could just to enter his base, but ended up getting kicked out or being fooled by him. He doesn't want us to get Yunifer. Drake angrily cursed as he punched the nearest wall. The gentle Holy Father Lawrence was already gone. His face was dark and filled with lividness. Asher had been in a coma and won't wake up no matter hard I tried to wake him up. He forced himself to shut down like an AI. What should we do now? Everything is out of control, and for sure that old man did something to Yunifer. I can't let that happen. We can't let that happen. Lawrence angrily spat off as he clenched his fist and his canine was visible. Although I remained calm on the surface, I was already enraged after finding out that it was that old man, the Alpha King, who captured Yunifer. We tried to seek him and to meet him, but ended up being denied. I couldn't help but grit my teeth in anger, especially since it seemed Father was trying to make us his enemy. He even tried to force Samantha to be out of Luna yesterday. However, when Drake found out that it was the Alpha Kinut, the father who kidnapped and captured Yunifer, he lost his rationality and even almost killed Samantha. It was a good thing that Lawrence and I were there to stop him from choking Samantha and killing her. Even the Alpha King was livid when he found out that Drake choked the supposed-to-be Luna. However, Drake just expressionlessly laughed at him and even talked back to the Alpha King. We didn't even have the time to question him because he had already thrown us in the basement and was locked to reflect ourselves. Before he locked us, the Alpha King sneered and promised to deliver the cold and lifeless body of the human body they loved to us. When we heard that, we almost transformed into our wolves and attack him, but the silver metallic bar prevent us from going out. We are helpless in front of the Alpha King. I want to become the Alpha King, Drake suddenly stated, making us look at him with widened eyes. Drake sneered and added, I'm going to kill the Alpha King and take his throne. In that way, I'll be strong enough to protect Yunifer, our mate. Hearing this, I and Lawrence nodded our heads, indicating we support him. That beast probably hurt Yunifer. I want to kill him for hurting our mate, Lawrence coldly said as he stared at the metallic bar. The way he spoke those words was as if he wasn't killing his father, his blood-related. I also wanted to do that. Anyway, he is no longer our father. He never sees us as his son, but more than mere useful objects he could use and discard any time. I also said while nodding my head. The three of us know each other very well. We don't have any fatherly feelings towards the Alpha King. It was just a hatred we suppressed ever since we were a child. We witnessed how ruthless and the manipulative, cunning person he is. He would take anything he wants and control everything. If something is out of his control, he would go crazy and would start killing someone. Especially when we were kids. We have a nanny. This nanny, we regard her as our mother since she was the only one who showered us with love, treated us as her child, cooked for us, helped us, and even the one who took care of us. However, when my father found out that someone took care of us as a mother would, he slit her neck and coldly killed her right in front of us. Then he told us, you only have one mother, and that is Luciana. After he said that, he turned around and left. We watched our nanny being killed in front of us. It was also the start that we started being dependent on each other and stopped relying on our father and everyone else other than the three of us. We endured the nausea of breathing the same air as his father. We endured everything just for the sake of getting revenge in the end. We were planning to step by step the process of taking our father's throne and let him see that he raised a tiger instead of a cub. However, things happened. Things changed. Our father did something to Yunifer that is unforgivable. We can't let our beloved woman, our beloved mate, hurt or die. Lawrence looked at me and nodded his head. We have to get out of here first, and let's see if we can find Yunifer here. We can just deal with that old man later, but Yunifer's situation can't wait. Drake and I both nodded our heads to express our agreement. Let's not delay it for a little longer. Let's break this basement. After we said that, we started smashing everything that we could see in our eyes that can be smashed. We've gone wild. Third-person POV. The abuser was about to stretch his arms to check the lifeless body of Yunifer's pulse when suddenly he found out that the hand he used to stretch was suddenly cut off. The abuser screamed wildly upon seeing the blood kept on dripping down on the bed like a river. It kept on continuously flowing out of his body without stopping. Even if he was a wolf and had a self-healing ability, he found out that his wound didn't heal nor stop the blood. He couldn't heal his body, which made his eyes widen from fright. What the hell is happening? What is going on? Suddenly, he heard a cold voice coming in front of him. Your self-healing ability as a wolf is completely useless. Whatever you do is useless against me. Now it's my turn to make you see what hell looks like and feel what a nightmare tastes like. The abuser's eyes widened when he saw the supposed to be dead, was wide awake, smiling sweetly at him. However, the way she smiled made him shiver, especially since there were traces of blood all over her body. Third-person POV. The woman who was lying on the bed earlier was now sitting on the bed, elegantly ignoring the fact that her body was filled with blood, while her wavy silvery hair was sparkling as it fell onto her back. She had a soft smile plastered on her face, but her lifeless eyes were as cold as ice. You seemed to be enjoying punishing my sweet little darling earlier. The woman's voice was soft and charming, but every word she uttered contained sharp and heavy words. The abuser was about to open his mouth to speak when suddenly he saw that his world turned upside down. He couldn't feel any pain, but he knows he was already destined for hell. Satan had already appeared in front of him to collect the debt. The woman coldly glanced at the abuser, whose neck was snapped, and his eyes were still wide open even when he died. The woman clicked her tongue and glanced at her sharp claws, which were filled with blood. Her face was filled with disgust as she tore the bedsheet and used the left side where it wasn't stained by Yunifer's blood, then wiped the blood that was on her claws. When the woman glanced at the shirt she was wearing, it was a large gown like for some hospital, and it was dyed red. Her face couldn't be drawn upon seeing how ugly she dresses. She tore off the gown that was filled with red, leaving only a black sports bra and high-waist brown trousers. When she tried to move, she heard a clanging sound on her ankles. Her eyes coldly glanced at the chains that stopped her from moving, then she used her hands to crush them with her bare hands. In just a second, the chain became fragments. Ha! Finally, I came out. It has been a long time ever since I came out. My dear darling, you suffered a lot of grievances from the others. Now let me erase your grievances for you. The woman softly whispered in herself as she tried to sense the consciousness of someone inside of her that seemed to be disappearing. But the woman tried to wrap that disappearing someone with her body so that she won't dissipate. A gentle smile appeared from the woman when she was coaxing someone inside of her consciousness. But then, her sweet, gentle smile disappeared like a bubble that popped when she felt someone's presence appear in front of her. Her eyes narrowed and coldly glanced at those subordinates of the so-called Alpha King, who also abused her little darling. I hate it when someone dares to bully my little darling. The woman softly said. As she pulled the metallic cell, it was easily stretched by her like a rubber band, which made it for her to easily get out of the cell. Her eyes swept at the subordinates. 1, 2, 3. Oh, there are only 5 of them? How boring. It would be better if there were a lot of them so that this prison cell would be filled with blood, and it would be a surprise to the Alpha King. The woman let out disappointment as she looked at the 5 cannon fodder with sympathy. How did you come out? Cannon fodder number 1 asked while pointing at the woman while stuttering. The woman let out a soft chuckle as her eyes coldly glint. Oh, see that hole? She pointed to the metallic bar that bent enough to make a hole for a person. Then she smiled sweetly at the cannon fodder, who asked, I walked out from that hole. You. The cannon fodders trembled in fright, especially upon seeing the lifeless body of the abuser, and it was such a horrible scene. Anyone who saw this would tremble. When the woman looked at their expression, especially after seeing the abuser, she just killed brutally. She coldly snickered. Oh, you're afraid after seeing him being like that? But you weren't afraid, nor even have a drip of sympathy towards the poor little human whom you tortured? The woman coldly said as she walked in bare feet towards the cannon fodders. Before they could get away from her, the woman grunted and used her sharp claws to slit their necks open, making the 3 who successfully survived scream in fright as their eyes were wide open, looking at the woman with horror. Monster, they uttered in the fight, making the woman laugh. Remember, this monster's body was the one whom you abused. The woman said with a gentle tone as fur started to appear on her neck while using her power and directly sliced their neck. The woman spits at the heads that were on the ground. She let out a chuckle upon seeing them being disposed of by her. However, when she saw the blood stain on her bare feet, her eyes coldly grunted and her face was filled with displeasure. She glanced at the clothing that the dead wore, tore it off, then used it to wipe the blood on her feet. Seeing that they were clean, she happily threw them away and went outside of the place while humming a song. Every place she walks, there would always be a wolf who would attack her, but ended up mercilessly killed by her by separating itself from its body. Then she would continue to roam around the place with a smile on her face. I want to meet the bastard king. Ha! He hurt my precious darling to the point that she tried to commit suicide. I'll have to make him pay. She hummed again while kicking the subordinates of the Alpha King who tried to harm her. Then she used her hands and caught the hold of the collar of the subordinate. Veins appeared on her pale hands when she uses force to lift him and looked at him in the eyes. "Where is your Alpha King?" The woman coldly asked, but seeing that the subordinate was too scared to meet her to the point that he became mute, the woman asked and sliced his neck as usual. Fuck! All of them are big motherfuckers. Why can't anyone lead me to that fucking so-called Alpha King? This is fucking pissing me off. Her gentle smile was disappeared and replaced with a violent and livid reaction. Veins appeared on the side of her neck and her forehead from anger. Her eyes turned bloody red eyes, which looked like blood. Her canine became sharper than the angrier she became. Suddenly, a gentle consciousness, as if trying to soothe her, made the violent woman calm down as she took a deep breath. A gentle smile appeared on her lips as she softly murmured to herself, "Rest assured, I will kill them all and honor their blood for you. None of them will be left. I'll make them pay for the pain you've suffered these days, darling." After she said that, she hummed again and continued slicing every one of her opponents with ease, such as slicing a piece of onion. What should I do to make the Alpha King come out from his throne and meet me? Should I kill all of the subordinates that are placed in this creepy old mansion? The woman softly asked herself. If the dead subordinates could talk, they would say, "Aren't you already doing it? Killing each one of us?" Boring. Boring. Everything was boring to her. No one could match her strength. They got easily killed by her, making the woman grunt. She wanted someone strong enough to fight with her. She missed the kind of past where she would go in the way and had such a powerful opponent. But now they were all weak. Too wimpy. Too weak to fight with her. She even tried to minimize her strength so that they could fight back with her, but in the end, they were still either dead or unconscious. They were far too weak. That's why, when the woman found out the name of the Alpha King, her eyes brightened. She thinks that the Alpha King is the most powerful among the alphas. He might be good at fighting, and might be powerful. Just thinking about that made the woman smile from ecstasy. It had been a while since she fought someone, and besides, this was the first time she fully came out from her human darling of her named Yunifer. That human Yunifer was also strong. She was stronger than any human, but sadly she got easily tutored because these people put a drug inside of her body to weaken her strength, which was why Yunifer was helpless against them. Just by thinking about how they tortured her little darling, the woman's brows furrowed and her face was filled with anger. She gnashed her teeth and clenched her fist. Good. These goddamn motherfuckers did a good job provoking someone they shouldn't provoke. The woman immediately dodged the attack and swiftly moved to the left side, using the strength of her feet and twirling her body to kick her opponent, leading her opponent to fly meters away from her and cough up blood. Where is the Alpha King? Tell him that I want to meet him. The woman coldly said as her body didn't stop beating her opponents cruelly without mercy. One of the Alpha King's subordinates snickered after hearing her arrogant words. You woman, how daring are you to meet the Alpha King? Are you worthy to face him? When the woman heard those words, she stopped kicking the other person and turned her back to the subordinate, who spoke. Then a smile blossomed on her lips. Really? What should I do to be worthy to meet him then? The woman softly asked, while smiling at the subordinate. Then she made a pained expression before she added, You see, I have something to ask the Alpha King. That's why I needed his presence so that he can answer these questions of mine. The subordinate snickered and became more daring when he mocked the woman who acted pitiful to him. You are not worthy of meeting the Alpha King. That's why we can't let you meet him. Besides, you have to go back to your cell, he coldly said while looking at the woman with mockery. Not receiving the answer that she wanted, the woman put down her act as her face became cold while looking at the man in front of her. And what? To torture me again? That damned perverted Alpha King of yours just kidnapped my little darling and then tortured her without a reason? The woman became livid as she questioned the man. Before the man could open his mouth and utter nonsense again, when the woman cut him off as she added with a nonchalant tone. Besides, I can't go back to the cell anymore. I already destroyed it, and I don't want to go back there again. It was fucking dirty. The woman said while coldly looking at the man whose face was crumpled and his expression turned worse. Just when someone is from behind the woman, sneaking behind her so that he could attack her, when suddenly blood spurts from the hand that was holding the long, sharp sword. The hand, along with the sharp sword, flew meters away from its body. When the enemy glanced at his hand that was detached from his body, he screamed, "Ah! My hands! My hands!" He kept on repeating those words while his face was filled with anger and grievance. He also tried to stop the blood that kept on oozing from his arms, but it didn't stop. He became more anxious as he felt that he was going to die from the blood loss. When the man saw his fellow subordinate in this situation, he glanced at the woman with silver hair, who was coldly looking at the fallen opponent as if it was nothing to do with her. The man looked at her with shock. "You are cruel. You are a monster." The man couldn't help but mutate. His words are enough for the woman to look at him. She coldly replied, "If I were such a monster, what would you call that so-called Alpha King for yours? Satan?" Third person POV. The woman didn't spare the man's life and directly slit his throat. Before the man died, he hoarsely asked with difficulties, "Who are you?" The woman stopped wiping her claws and glanced at the head that was separated from its body, and its eyes were wide open. Its face was pale and lifeless. The woman snickered, but she still answered the dead man's question. "Sahara. My name is Sahara. You should avoid meeting me if you ever see me in hell." After she said that, she turned around and glanced at the bloody mess that she made. If someone would take a glance at the mess that Sahara made, for sure that they would scream in fright and would be traumatized for their whole life. They would start looking at Sahara with eyes of horror, as if they were looking at some kind of ruthless leader. Just like the Alpha King. They were a bit similar, but at the same time, they were different. If someone would see the difference between the two, about who is the most ruthless leader, they have the first person in mind. It was Sahara. After all, Sahara would mercilessly kill someone without blinking, and she would also smile at them before she killed them as if she was just slicing a piece of garbage. It was such a terrifying sight that even a psychopath wouldn't compare it with Sahara's work of art. Sahara, on the other hand, didn't think much about the person that she had killed. After all, she thinks that she wasn't in the wrong place and thinks that the people whom she killed was sending themselves to their death. She had been long used to killing since she was always exposed to war before. This was the first time that she had woken up from such a long nap. Although she was the wolf inside Yunifer's body, she was well hidden and a little unconscious. She couldn't come out. That's why Yunifer manifested as a human, even though she was a human. It was all because Sahara had been protecting Yunifer's body. Yunifer had been enduring those traumas, dark nightmares and abuse. All of those torments kept on haunting her every night and day. That's why she sealed herself off. There was a night that she tried to commit suicide, but it was also Sahara who stopped herself by wrapping Yunifer with her consciousness and sharing the nightmares that Yunifer had experienced with her. After that, she had long exhausted her strength and fell into a deep sleep. It was only this time that she woke up because she felt restlessness, and she felt that something was weird with Yunifer. She forced herself to wake up from the deep slumber, and what she saw was that Yunifer was chained in the bed. Her body was oozing with blood. The flesh on her back was torn. Her face was swollen from the punch, and she even felt her ribs were broken from the beating and kick. Sahara was angered instantly after seeing what happened to Yunifer. When she saw that Yunifer was about to commit suicide, she tried to scream and shouted at her to stop, but it was as if Yunifer couldn't hear her anymore. When the time that Yunifer slit her wrist, Sahara forcefully takes over her body and immediately used her self-healing ability to heal the wounds, and even the scars were erased to prevent Yunifer from seeing and reopening her scars. All Sahara could think right now was to kill all of those dirty brats who dared to make Yunifer suffer such injustice. Every time she would kill, she would keep on whispering the same words. "Let me see the Alpha King." She became like a killing machine that killed without emotions or sympathy. Blood. So much blood. She couldn't care less about her appearance anymore or whether she was clean right now. The only thing that she wanted was to kill the Alpha King. Her eyes were starting to turn blood, and the canine in her mouth was starting to become sharper. She emitted such a killing intent that almost covered the whole dark mansion. All of the wolves who are inside the mansion shivered when they felt such an enormous amount of killing intent. Sahara was slowly eaten by her anger. She became more and more out of her control. All she could think was to kill the Alpha King. Despite that, she still wore a sweet smile on her lips, and she would laugh whenever she would kill someone. When they saw Sahara being like this, the wolves immediately turned their back and run away after seeing that they were in trouble. However, despite that, they tried to run away or get out of the mansion. It was as if Sahara was always behind him and was waiting for them to fall for his trap. They realized that they couldn't get out even if they wanted to. There was a force that was preventing them from running away. Sahara's smile deepened even more as she mercilessly cut off her enemies while turning deaf to their pleas. How dare they tried to hurt Yunifer? When Yunifer pled with them on the first day, did they let her go? No. They just laugh at her for being a fool who made their Alpha King angry at her. They kept on mocking her for being a slut who tried to seduce the Alpha King's sons, which are the trio alphas. Sahara put a gentle smile as she gently patted her chest, as if she was patting Yunifer. My poor little darling. Should I also take good care of those trio alphas who hurt you also? I hate it when someone hurt you, my dear. Sahara softly said, but to her disappointment, she didn't receive any answers from Yunifer. Yunifer remained unconscious and refused to talk. However, Sahara wasn't gloomy. It was because if she would eliminate those who hurt Yunifer, then would Yunifer be okay? That's what she thinks. Sahara let out a soft chuckle as she watched the dark mansion become a bloody mansion. All of them are dead. She killed them all. This made her feel relieved upon seeing that the whole mansion became quiet. Although the mansion looked grand, Sahara could feel that it was already an abandoned mansion. Yet it was secluded and placed on private property. That's why, other than the Alpha King's subordinates, there was no one else who could get inside there, unless they had a relationship with the Alpha King. Seeing that everything became quiet, she let out a heavy sigh and glanced at herself, which was filled with blood stains. She frowned in disgust, as she suddenly wanted to take a bath to take off this disgusting, dirty blood that stained her body. Just when she was about to turn around and find a bathroom to take a bath in, when suddenly someone called her. Yunifer. It was such a familiar voice that she would always hear when she was in a deep sleep inside of Yunifer. When she turned around, it was Ishid who called out her name, and his eyes were as bright as stars. However, this beautiful scene didn't move Sahara. Not even a little bit. All because this trio, who appeared in front of her with a wide smile plastered on their lips, made Yunifer hurt. They hurt her to the point that it drove Yunifer mad. So what if Yunifer just misunderstood things? No matter what, they shouldn't let her feel that way. Anyway, Sahara is biased when it comes to Yunifer. Whatever Yunifer did is always right. If these men made Yunifer cry and made her question her worth, these trio alphas don't deserve to be with her. Sahara raised her head and looked up at the trio, who also looked at her with worry. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Ishid asked out of worry, making Sahara laugh in mockery. Sahara smiled at them and answered, Of course I am fine. There was no such thing that I could handle. I am an independent woman, so there's no such thing as relying on a man. You don't have to worry about me. When they heard Sahara's words, they frowned. Lawrence looked at him with a suspicious gaze, and then he coldly questioned her. Who are you? Where is Yunifer? Sahara wasn't affected by the killing intent Lawrence emitted. Instead, she coldly laughed at them. She died, Sahara said, while coldly looking at the trio, whose eyes widened upon hearing Yunifer's words. Drake was the first one to disagree. Impossible! There's no way she would die. Sahara looked at her with mockery. Why not? Those fucking wolves tortured her and were driven mad by the Alpha King, leading her to commit suicide. She was deeply hurt. After Sahara said that, she turned around and was about to leave when her wrist was caught by Drake, making her pupils dilate and her eyes slowly turned blood red. She started to emit such a killing intent that made the trio flinch a bit, yet Drake still didn't let go of her wrist. What else do you want me to say? Who are you in her life, and who is she in your life? Why don't you just go with that so-called Luna of yours? Why do you keep on bothering Yunifer? Sahara shouted angrily while glaring at them. When Drake heard her words, he shook his head. No, this is a complete misunderstanding. Sahara laughed coldly. Misunderstanding? So what? You didn't explain it to Yunifer. Why? Do you think that she's a fool and can't be trusted? Or maybe you think that she's too naive, that's why you wanted to play with her? Isn't this what you wanted? To make her feel pain? To hurt her? To die? Lawrence disagreed loudly. No, we were planning to tell her everything after we solved the problem. We didn't take Samantha as our Luna. We don't plan to do so. We were just trying to fool the Alpha King so that he won't continue to bother Yunifer. We swear we were trying to explain it to her right after. Sahara snickered and glanced at him. Now what? She's already gone. Because of your lack of trust, lack of communication, and also lack protection, Yunifer was already gone. She already committed suicide. Just go and leave me alone. You won't be able to see her anymore. When Sahara said that, pain flashed through their eyes as they held Sahara tightly as if they were preventing her from leaving. They looked like they would kneel in front of Sahara just to beg her to let them see Yunifer. Sahara looked at the pitiful souls who were begging her and couldn't help but mock them. What are you kneeling for? I'm not a saint who can bring back the dead. Sahara ruthlessly said, And no, I'm sure that she was still with you. You were hiding her for us. Ishid took the courage to say while looking at Sahara with reddened eyes. Sahara raised her brows. Who told you about that? Your wolves? Although you humans are mated with Yunifer while I am mated with the wolves inside of you, it doesn't change the fact that the bond formed between us because you didn't mark her. That's why we can completely go our separate ways, and let's not bother each other again. No, we don't want that. We wanted to see Yunif. Before they could finish speaking, they suddenly stood up after kneeling, then they put their stance on attack mode, while at the same time, they were also hiding Sahara from behind them, as if they were protecting her. Come out! Drake coldly said, while his eyes slowly changed from golden color as his claws started to get sharp. It was also the same with Lawrence and Ishid. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of them and walked leisurely. My, I didn't think that I would meet the trio here. How lucky I am. Third person Pov. When they heard such a playful tone coming from a tall man who was in his 190 centimeters and was wearing a formal suit. He came off as a person who had a strong authority, and he had a smirk plastered on his lips when he looked at them. Sahara couldn't help but raise her head upon seeing the man. She could feel that this person was a wolf and had a high rank compared to the subordinates of the Alpha King whom she had killed now. David, the right hand of the Alpha King. It has been a long time ever since we met you. You're still annoying as ever. Drake calmly said while meeting eyes of David. When Sahara heard his word, she looked at David from up to down and chuckled. So this one is the right hand of the Alpha King? Interesting. It's a pleasure to meet such a good and strong opponent. David, on the other hand, was slightly surprised by her words, but he tried to suppress it and calmly looked at her with a grin on his lips. So you're that Yunifer? The one that the Alpha King hated to the bones and the one who was destined to be the Alpha King's son, Luna? The work of destiny is quite ironic, David said while letting out a laugh while looking at Sahara. When Sahara heard this, her brows slightly raised as an amusement was plastered on her face. Really? I'm also interested in why your Alpha King hated me so much. As far as I remember, all of my enemies are either disabled, dead, or helpless. So who is he in my life? Sahara playfully said while looking at David with a grin. Having to meet someone as rotten as her, David couldn't maintain the smile on his face anymore. He looked at her with undisguised hatred as he sneered. You will face your death soon. He coldly sneered, making Sahara chuckle as she wiped her hands using Lawrence's shirt. Sahara smiled at her. Not as soon as you. When she said that, David's face was filled with red as he snapped his hand, and within just his call, a pack of wolves appeared in front of them, surrounding the trio as well as Sahara. Capture them! Focus on capturing that woman! David shouted while pointing his fingers at Sahara, who just calmly watched the scene while she was being protected by the trio. When Sahara saw this, she couldn't help but sneer. You don't need to defend me. nor even help me. After all, this is not your responsibility." Lawrence, who heard this, shook his head. "No, you are our mate. It's our responsibility to do so." Sahara felt a little bit helpless when she saw the trio who were fighting against the wolves who tried to capture her, trying their best to protect her while at the same time fighting with them. "Even if you three would do this, I won't guarantee that you might see Yunifer," Sahara calmly said while watching them with a bit of interest. Ishid shook his head and calmly answered, "It's fine. We believe that as long as Yunifer isn't dead, she will come out and meet us soon. It would take time, yes, but we are willing to wait for her." When Sahara heard their determination, she couldn't help but chuckle. Honestly, they were more mature than she thought. Her words would unconsciously soften when it comes to them. It seemed that she was destined to be with them, to be their mate, to be their Luna. Sahara could even feel the wolves inside of the trio, human wailing and screaming, trying to connect with her, to let her feel their presence, that they are here, and was willing to bond with her. When Sahara felt this, she was a bit hesitant and didn't want to give in so easily. After all, although there might be some kind of misunderstanding between the trio and Yunifer, she was still biased towards Yunifer. She also felt distressed, thinking that this trio was the one who hurt her precious darling. Sahara had been watching Yunifer ever since she was a child. She has always been with her. She was there when Yunifer suffered traumas, abuse, nightmares, pain, cries, agony, and laughter. Sahara had been with her when Yunifer had suffered a lot. She knew her pain. She understands her emotions. She understands her very well, much better than anyone else. The only thing that Sahara wished for Yunifer was for her to be happy, to live a happy and harmonious life. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as she's in a haven, then it's fine. Sahara doesn't have high standards when it comes to finding Yunifer's mate. What she wanted is for someone to love her as much as Sahara cares and loves her. Someone willing to go through sorrows and joy and share happiness and pain. Someone who won't betray her love. Someone who won't hurt her. And someone who would protect her. As long as they are what was mentioned above, Sahara would accept them for Yunifer. It doesn't matter if they are tall or not, rich or commoner. What she wanted to her is to have someone she can rely on. Sahara knows Yunifer the best. She knows that Yunifer doesn't tend to rely on someone. She would rather solve her problems than ask for someone's help for fear of bothering them. Yunifer may come off strong, but her heart was soft and weak. It was because of that she was easily defeated, especially since all of the problems that she kept inside of her heart had been piling up for years and years. That's why Sahara wanted to test how much these trio could hold on for Yunifer. She thought they would give up. After all, alphas are prideful. But what surprised her was that they were willing to wait and even protected her and Yunifer. They even almost get on their knees and beg just to let Yunifer come out. It was surprising for Sahara, but in the end, she was assured. All she had to do was to talk to Yunifer to let her come out. After all, it wasn't safe for her body if Sahara would continue to come out of her body any longer. After all, Sahara is a wolf hidden inside Yunifer. Yunifer's wolf. She can't stay on the surface for too long because it would harm Yunifer and it would also harm her. But she was more worried about Yunifer than herself. In the end, Sahara let out a helpless chuckle as she strengthened her claws and easily slit the throat of the wolf who was about to sneak an attack behind Lawrence. Lawrence looked back and was a little surprised that Sahara was willing to lend them hand. Perceiving their gazes, Sahara smiled at them. "They annoyed me. Might as well I help you take care of them." After seeing Sahara's strength, Drake and the twins nodded their heads to express their understanding, as well as relief. "Trouble you?" Sahara chuckled and shook her head. "No trouble at all. Just focus on protecting yourself. I can protect myself." Drake was about to shake his head after hearing what Sahara said when suddenly they heard an angry growl coming from David. "Capture that woman. Don't let her slip away, or else we will face the Alpha King's wrath. Don't hold back your strength when dealing with the trio of alphas just because they are Alpha King's son. Just do anything to weaken them. Just don't kill them," David angrily shouted while commanding the black wolves. Seeing that another pack of wolves had come out and they were well trained, Sahara's eyes sparkled in delight, as if someone had given her a bunch of sparkling treasures. When the trio saw this, they felt helpless. It wasn't until they also heard their wolves talking to them about wanting to take over the control so that they could also show off their strength towards their wolf mate, Sahara. When the trio heard that these wolves inside of them were very eager to show off their skills, the trio felt helpless, and they just hand over their control. In just a few seconds, the eyes of the trio had changed. One could tell that they had already given up their control over their wolves. Drake's wolf was named Alistair. Ishid's wolf was named Kyle, while Lawrence's wolf was named River. The three of them had stoic faces when they punched their enemies enough to make a hole in their bodies. They were serious when dealing with their enemies. They would kick, punch, slice, and chop them with either their hands, feet, legs, or their claws. They were ruthless and didn't need to spend any effort. They weren't just alphas in their name because when dealing with their enemies, the enemy would quiver and feel small upon their aura as an alpha. However, from time to time, their stoic face would be replaced by smiley and grins when they would look at Sahara, who was also dealing with the enemies who kept on coming like there was no end to them. Each time Sahara would curse because no end to these wolves kept on coming toward her. Even though she is a wolf and has a high-rank title like an alpha, since she is the first Lycan who appeared in history, it doesn't change the fact that there would be times when she would feel exhausted. After all, this was the first time that she was in control of Yunifer's body. This was the first time that she come out. Of course, her strengths were limited, especially since she was suppressed for almost 18 years, unlike the other werewolves who would take the control of their human bodies. Sahara wiped off the sweat on her forehead. Well, she couldn't tell if it was sweat or blood. She let out a heavy sigh as she was panting while watching the countless wolves who appeared again and again like there was no end. When the trio looked at Sahara and saw that her strength was already exhausted and she already reached her limits, they pursed their lips as they couldn't help but feel distressed. "Let's retreat for now," Drake suggested in a low tone, enough for his siblings to hear his words, and they also nodded their heads in understanding. Then, Ishid slowly approached Sahara, who was still fighting against her enemy, despite that she was tired. When Sahara saw him approaching, she slit the opponent's neck and then kicked him away, dragging the 4 wolves behind the one who was kicked. "What?" Sahara asked while looking at Ishid. Ishid mounted the words at her to prevent David, who was commanding in front, from hearing their words. "Retreat. Let's retreat." When Sahara guessed what he was trying to express, she nodded her head and made an okay sign. Retreating or escaping isn't an act of cowardice. After all, we can just go back to fight with them again once we regain our strength. That's why taking a step back is also good too. Sahara isn't a fool who would just stay here and die. She'd rather escape together with her life and gather forces. Sahara looked at the trio, who was also ready to escape. The 4 of them started to gather all of their strength in their legs, and in a flash, they ran as fastest as they could. She let out a gasp when she felt like she was being carried by someone. When she raised her head, it was Drake who carried her while running in a flash. "Fuck! Catch them!" They could hear the angry roar coming from David, who was also running to catch up with them. When they got out of the private property of the Alpha King, suddenly a pack of wolves appeared in front of them, which made them alert. It wasn't until they heard such a familiar, soft, and gentle voice. "Yunifer, I'm glad to see that you're fine." It was none other than Kale, who was smiling brightly at Sahara. Third person's POV. Sahara also smiled at her, and then she looked at the pack of wolves that were in front of them, seemed to be ready to fight. Then her eyesight also glanced at the man who was standing behind Kale. When Sahara perceived the gaze of the man, a meaningful smile appeared on her lips when their eyes met. The man behind Kale was none other than the clinic doctor that Yunifer saw in the past. He was Alpha Havoc, who seemed to have something about Kale. Sahara glanced at Kale and smiled at him sweetly before she looked at Drake, gesturing for him to put her down. At first, Drake didn't plan to listen to her, but in the end, he let out a heavy sigh and reluctantly put her down after perceiving the glare from Sahara. Then Sahara walked towards Kale and took the initiative to hug him as a friend. Yunifer's friend is also her friend. "How are you these days?" Kale asked as he also hugged her back. Little did he know that the man behind him emits such a killing intent, and he secretly clenched his fist. But Sahara was able to see Havoc's small movements, which made her amused, and she didn't even know that the trio who were behind were also clenching their fist as their eyes deepened, as if they couldn't wait to pull them away from each other. "I'm good. However, what are you doing here? It's dangerous," Sahara said while looking at him with worry before she retracted herself from hugging him, especially since Alpha Havoc seemed to be like an active volcano waiting to explode. Kale, who was oblivious to his surroundings, smiled gently at Sahara. "Well, I've been worried about you ever since you didn't go to school. I was restless after knowing that you didn't go to school. That's why I went to your apartment to check on you. However, what met me was your little brother named Asher. He told me that you were kidnapped, and he asked for help." After he said that, his eyes lingers on Sahara and kept on staring at her from up to down, trying to see if she had wounds or not. When his gaze glanced at the stain of Sahara's clothes, his eyes widened as his body trembled, looking at Sahara in disbelief and shock. "You're hurt," he softly said while his brows furrowed, staring at the blood in Sahara's clothes. Seeing him like this, a gentle smile appeared on Sahara's lips as her face unconsciously relaxed. She softly shook her head and answered him. "It's not my blood, so there's no need for you to worry. I'm not hurt," Sahara said with a smile. Then she continued in her mind. The one who had been hurt was Yunifer. Even if she was hurt and wounded, all of the wounds would be healed on their own without leaving any traces. Besides, given Yunifer's attitude, she doesn't want others to worry about her, and she would be reluctant to tell about her sufferings. Hearing this, Kale let out a sigh of relief. "It's a good thing to hear that you're fine. Although you seem to be different from before, you're still you." Sahara just smiled at her. Just when they were about to continue their small conversation, when the alpha behind Kale spoke in a low tone while his eyes remained looking at Kale. They managed to catch up. "Let's leave now that you have already seen her. Just leave the rest to my subordinates to handle them," Alpha Havoc said, while he leaned down to match his lips to Kale's ears, making Kale shiver as he slightly leaned sideward to avert from Alpha Havoc. These small movements made Alpha Havoc pursue his lips as his eyes slightly deemed. Kale softly nodded his head, and then he looked at Sahara, who was looking at them, making his ears redden, and he made a fake cough before he spoke. "Let's go now." "Havoc said that they are already here," Kale said while looking at Sahara. Sahara smiled and nodded her head. Just when she was about to walk, when she suddenly felt her body float. Her eyes glanced at the man who carried her. It was none other than River, the wolf of Lawrence. "I have feet. I can walk," Sahara said while looking at River. However, River just chuckled and didn't even have the intention of putting her down. "Let's go," River said while he looked at Alpha Havoc, who was holding Kale's hands. After he said that, all of them immediately retreated, getting away from the wolves that tried to capture them. However, they were restricted because Alpha Havoc's subordinates appeared in front of them, ready to attack them with all of their strengths, not letting them get away nor let them pass through. They decided to rest at Alpha Havoc's mansion, since it was Kale who invited them to rest at Havoc's mansion, especially since their security is secured, so they could rest assured. Before they could go to Havoc's mansion, Sahara gestured for River to put her down, making River look at her with a frown, but he still held her tightly without any intention of letting her down. "Where are you going?" It was Drake who asked while looking at Sahara, who seemed to be eager to leave. Sahara looked at Drake and calmly answered, "I'm going back to my apartment since Asher was there. Who knows what that Alpha King would do to capture me? Since they already run a background check on me, for sure that they already know that I have a brother, and they could use my brother as their hostage." Kale, who was also running while his hand was holding Havoc's hand, heard what Sahara said. He spoke. "You don't have to worry. Asher was safe and he was waiting for us in Havoc's house. I can assure you that he's fine there, away from any danger," Kale said while looking at me with assurance. Hearing this, I let out a relieved sigh and nodded my head. Sahara was relieved after hearing that Asher was fine and was away from danger. When they arrived at Havoc's mansion, the first person who greeted them was Asher, who was sitting on a sofa while waiting for them to arrive. When he saw that someone familiar appeared, he jumped from the sofa and ran in their direction. "Yunifer!" he shouted with joy, and his eyes sparkled in delight. When Sahara heard such a childish yet familiar voice calling out her name, a smile appeared on her lips as she immediately got off River's embrace and ran towards Asher, who was smiling from ear to ear. She swiftly held him in her embrace and kissed his cheeks. "Asher," Sahara softly said with a smile on her lips. However, Asher stopped moving as his face became more serious as his small hands gently wiped away Sahara's tears. "Don't cry," Asher softly said with a reddened eye while wiping Sahara's tears. Even Sahara was slightly taken aback when she felt tears keep on flowing from her eyes, even though she doesn't want to cry in this situation. However, she already guessed whose tears it was. Sahara couldn't help but chuckle as she slightly closed her eyes to feel Yunifer's emotions that almost overwhelmed her. It was filled with love, sadness, aggrieved agony, and pain. All of those emotions were mixed that Yunifer had been trying to bury deep inside her heart, but when she saw Asher, all of them started to gush out. "You can come out now, Yunifer. I know that you are suffering from pain. I know it all, and I heard your sorrows. You know that I am always on your side no matter what happens, so if you still can't take over the control, then take your time, but don't make it longer, okay? It would be bad if I would control yourself for longer." Sahara softly said while speaking to Yunifer, who was in her spiritual body inside of her heart and was still sleeping. Yet Sahara knows that she had been awake this whole time. Rather, she was just taking her time to absorb all of her emotions back. "You aren't Yunifer. Are you her wolf or a split personality?" Sahara opened her eyes upon hearing what Asher said. Even the trio, Alpha Havoc and Kale, were slightly taken aback by how Asher immediately found out that she wasn't Yunifer. Sahara looked at Asher, who was sternly looking at her, trying to inspect and see through her by only looking at her eyes. A helpless smile appeared on Sahara's lips and gently nodded her head. "Do you know what split personality is?" Asher solemnly nodded his head. "Yes, I know. Split personality is a trauma that comes in any form. It is a result of trying to escape or hide from the trauma. It is a way of shielding the main personality from painful experiences. I would not be surprised if my sister have that. She suffered a lot from her childhood to her teen. She usually hides her pain and won't even let me know that she was suffering from any pain. I had always known that my sister had still regarded me as a child. That's why she won't tell me anything." Sahara was just smiling as she patted Asher's head, and his face was filled with grievances. Before Sahara could comment, Asher complained again. She would just smile at me and say that she was fine even though she was not. She almost lost her mind because of the pain, yet she still says that she was okay. I wanted to grow up quickly so that she can also lean on me more. When Sahara heard this, tears fell her cheeks that she couldn't control. It was the emotions of Yunifer again. Sahara helplessly said as she was about to wipe her tears when suddenly a white handkerchief appeared in front of her. When she looked up, it was Ishid who had given her the handkerchief. She accepted it and used it to wipe her tears. Then she softly looked at Asher. "Yes, I'm not Yunifer. Rather, my name is Sahara. I am not Yunifer's split personality, but rather I am her wolf. However, you can still treat me as Yunifer since I am also her. It's just that she is a human while I am a wolf, but it made us no different from each other," Sahara softly said while looking at Asher, whose eyes and nose were red, yet he was trying to hold back his tears from falling. "Can you let me see her?" Asher's voice quivered while looking at Sahara pitifully. Sahara's heart couldn't help but to tighten and felt distressed upon seeing him like this, but in the end, she shook her head. "It's not because I don't want you to see her, but rather she won't come out. She was still dealing with her emotions. So can you give her some time? For sure that she would come out to meet you." Sahara reassured him while looking him in the eyes. Although Asher wanted to see Yunifer very much, he still reluctantly nodded his head. "Okay, I will wait for her to come back." Asher softly said while pursing his lips. Sahara sweetly smiled and rubbed his hair. That's my boy. You can also treat me as your sister. Asher nodded his head while hugging me. She helplessly smiled and glanced at the trio, who was silent while listening to our conversation. She doesn't know what they were thinking about, but she could guess that they were guilty and blaming themselves for what happened to Yunifer, Sahara's pav. After Asher cried heavily, he fell asleep. He seemed to be tired of crying. That's why he fell asleep. I let him lay down on the soft bed, which is the guest room that Havoc provided before I left the room, then went back to the living room. My eyes couldn't help but glance at the trio, who was sitting on the sofa while Havoc and Kale excused themselves since they had to prepare the meal, leaving us in the living room. Silence filled the living room. None of us took the initiative to speak. Even Ishid, who had a blabbermouth, was silent. He pursed his lips as his shoulders were down. They all looked dejected. I could tell that these three were blaming themselves for not being able to be there when Yunifer needed them the most, for not clearing up the misunderstanding they have between Yunifer, and for not being strong enough to go against their father, the Alpha King. Well, I couldn't send my comfort to them. After all, I'm not Yunifer. Although I understand Yunifer's emotions the most and I could tell what she would say in this situation, I still feel like it would be better if Yunifer would be the one who should tell them how she felt. She should start standing up for herself. It would be better if it's like that? I just glanced at them and didn't say anything. Instead, I spoke to Havoc, who calmly walked in our direction while his servant was holding a tray with a cup of coffee on it. What's your reason for helping me? No, for helping Yunifer? I couldn't help but ask while looking at him intently. After all, from his looks, he wasn't the type of a person who would lend his hand to someone whom he couldn't use or can't benefit him at all. He looked like a ruthless ruler who wouldn't lift his finger, and instead he would let his servant do all of the work. Alpha Havoc's eyes shifted at me and nonchalantly replied, I didn't have the plan to save you. After all, saving you won't benefit me at all, and besides, it would only destroy my connection with the Alpha King. Then why did you help me if it can't benefit you? I asked with my brows raised. Alpha Havoc snickered as his eyesight glanced at Kale, who was baking cookies in the kitchen. Then he looked away. I got tired of listening to his pleas. He vaguely said while he sat on the chair. However, I seemed to perceive what he was trying to express. I just let out a soft chuckle. Then I looked at the trio again. So what are you going to do now? We were planning to kill the Alpha King. After all, he was the one who killed Yunifer. If it wasn't for me to use my strength and taking over control while she was weakened, for sure that both of us would die now. After all, as soon as I took control, all of the heavy wounds she received, even the slit on her wrist, immediately healed. I could imagine how she endured the torture for 2 days, and I could tell that she wanted to kill the Alpha King, who made her this way. Of course, I, Sahara, also wanted to kill the Alpha King who hurt my precious darling. I explained while giving them a sweet smile. It was Drake who spoke with a cold tone. I have no objections to the plan of killing the Alpha King. Although we are blood-related, we didn't see him as our father. We've hated him ever since we were young. We have been planning on taking the throne and taking him down from the beginning. Ishid and Lawrence immediately nodded their heads to indicate that they agreed with Drake's words. Seeing that these two didn't have any problem killing the Alpha King, rather they would support the decision, I let out a relieved sigh. I looked at the trio and asked, How many subordinates do you have that are under your wing, and you can be sure that they won't betray you? Drake was the first who answered. I have the total for 200 wolves that I trained to be a spy, an assassin, and a knight. I can swear that they are loyal to me. After all, even though I looked easygoing and was focused on my studies, and even in my private life, I still have eyes and ears to see who's genuine and who's fake. Lawrence also spoke right after. Although I have less than my brother Drake, since I only have 150 subordinates, I can assure you that their fighting skills are on top notch since they are trained by me, and of course, they are certainly loyal to me. I have ways to verify if they only have me as their master or not. Then lastly, Ishid spoke with a calm tone. I only have 100 subordinates under my wings. I also train them with my capabilities. All of our subordinates are like our shadows, and they won't be seen if they don't want to be seen. They are always lurking around us, spying and hiding in a place that can't be seen and making sure that we are safe. Don't worry, even if the Alpha King was the king of all the alphas, they won't betray us just for the sake of our father. They are loyal to us, so there's no need to worry about betrayal. After hearing them calmly tell about their subordinates, even though I only asked for the numbers of their knights, I couldn't help but smile at them, as I could feel their unconditional trust in me. Suddenly, Alpha Havoc spoke with a grin plastered on his lips. "You sure trust me very much. What should you do if I'm a spy from the Alpha King? What if I would sell the information that I got now?" I turned my head, smiling at him, and then shook. "You wouldn't do that." Alpha Havoc raised his brows while looking at me. "So confident?" "Of course. After all, Kale is on my side. He won't betray me. He might betray the others, but he won't betray me. He won't betray Yunifer," I calmly said with a smile on my face. The smile on his lips stiffened as he looked at me coldly. "I hate that smile on your face. Oh my, I can understand that you are jealous of Yunifer. I mean, after all, Yunifer is lovable and adorable. However, you don't have to be jealous. He's your mate after all, and you already marked him." A shock appeared on his face, and he looked at me with widened eyes. "How did you know? There should be no one other than me who can tell, especially since we hide it from everyone." I smiled and pointed my silver eyes. "There's nothing that I can't see with my naked eyes." "What's your identity?" he coldly asked as he already regained his posture. Yet, his eyes were looking at me intently. Even the trio was listening closely to our conversation. They seemed to be interested in our conversation, even though they have this complicated look after hearing about the relationship between the Omega Kale and the Alpha Havoc. But I didn't pay attention to them this time. Instead, I leaned my body on the sofa while calmly looking at Alpha Havoc. "I am a Lycan, the first Lycan who appeared in history. With my strength alone, I can assure you that I can defeat hundreds of my enemies. However, it's just that my strengths are limited for now because Yunifer won't cooperate with me because she's still dealing with her problems, but if Yunifer can take over the control, we will be invisible." I elegantly introduced myself while looking at them. The trio had shock visible on their faces. And even Alpha Havoc, but they immediately paid attention to their identity and faked their cough before they cleared their throat. "It's no wonder why you're strong." Ishid couldn't help but to comment, making me chuckle. Hearing my chuckle, I saw his ears redden as he averted my gaze. "Of course, I'm strong, especially since the body that I'm using is healthy, strong, and has plenty of muscles. Yunifer is also strong even though she's a human. She can even single-handedly defeat you in hand-to-hand combat. Don't underestimate her. She became a famous fighter in the underworld," I said while laughing. My words made them doubt. "Really? How come I haven't heard her name in the underworld if she's that famous?" It was Havoc who asked, looking at me while trying to analyze whether I was telling the truth or not. He didn't believe my words. "Have you heard the name Moriarty?" I asked while looking at them. Their eyes widened when they hit the sudden realization. "She's that Moriarty? The #1 fighter in the underworld who has consecutively won almost 100 of fights?" They all asked in unison. They couldn't believe my words at all. However, I didn't plan to persuade them to believe me. Whether they believe me or not, it's their problem, not mine. "Yeah, she's that Moriarty. She disguises herself as a man since she can't enter the fight if she's a woman," I calmly said while drinking the coffee. Ishid then flicked his fingers as his eyes sparkled after he thought of something, making us look at him. So that was the reason why we happened to see him wearing a man's wig and sharp makeup to make herself look fierce and manly. It was just that Yunifer was good at hiding her disguise that time and immediately changed the subject to lead us away from asking her some questions. That's why we didn't manage to get an answer to her. Rather, we forgot about it," Ishid said with excitement and even slapped his knees. Even Lawrence and Drake suddenly nodded their heads after they remembered that day. I let out a soft chuckle after seeing his expression. "That's right. My precious darling is indeed strong and gorgeous." However, Alpha Havoc just looked at us with his stoic expression, then he broke the happy atmosphere. "So do you know why the Alpha King deliberately targeted Yuriana?" Alpha Havoc asked while looking at me. Before I could open my mouth to answer, when suddenly a gentle voice filled with worries spoke near beside Havoc, who only appeared now. "Will she be in danger?" It was Kale who asked while holding the large plate filled with cookies that he baked. Alpha Havoc's eyesight immediately went towards Kale, staring at him intently after seeing him. Even I couldn't help but feel helpless as this lovey-dovey thing appeared in front of my eyes. I felt blinded. But since I already became blind, I'll just pretend not to see their intimate gazes towards each other. The stoic expression of Havoc immediately softened, and he also spoke softly. "She will be fine, so stop worrying about her and focus on me." Kale's ears reddened, and he helplessly patted his shoulder. "You're already strong, so there's no need for me to worry about you." "I am not strong," Havoc said, and his eyes were telling Kale to worry about him. Hearing their words, I couldn't help but roll my eyes and just averted my gaze. Suddenly, I felt the three huskies, wolves, staring at me with a smile on their face. It seemed that the trio gave their control to their wolves. "We also need your love and care to become strong," the trio of wolves said while looking at me pitifully. My lips twitched as I looked at them with a dumbfounded look. "What are you trying to do?" "Begging for your love." Third person's POV. At night, before Sahara falls asleep, she notices such a familiar presence lurking outside of her room, making her frown as she soothes her brows. She stood up and climbed off her bed, then walked towards the door of her room and opened it. Her brows raised as she glanced at the trio, who didn't expect Sahara to find them, stiffened as they froze like a statue. "What are you three trying to do? Are you trying to make me laugh?" Sahara jokingly said while looking at the three fools. Ishid scratched the back of his neck and shyly answered, "Actually, we wanted to sleep in the same bed as you." Sahara couldn't help but raise her brows. "Is that all?" It was as if Sahara saw through their intentions. Drake didn't hide what they wanted. Instead, he boldly told Sahara about it. "We wanted to talk to Yunifer, can we?" he softly said while looking at Sahara, who crossed her arms. When Sahara heard this, she wasn't shocked anymore. After all, she had been waiting for this day to come, especially given the stubborn personality of these three. For sure, that won't stop until they could talk to Yunifer and clear up their misunderstandings. Sahara let out a heavy sigh before she opened the door to let them in. The trio's eyes sparkled and immediately stepped inside before Sahara could change their mind. After that, they walked towards Sahara's bed and politely sat down while looking at Sahara, who was standing in front of them. "Wait for a moment. I'll convince her to take the control of the body, and even if she won't come out, she could still hear what you would say. What I heard is what she would also hear." After Sahara said that, she lay down on the bed and closed her eyes, trying to connect herself with Yunifer. The trio just stared at Sahara while their hearts were in turmoil. They could hear the sound of their heart beating so fast while staring at Sahara, who was breathing smoothly. Meanwhile, Sahara, she was already talking with Yunifer through their consciousness. "Yunifer, they want to talk to you. I'm sure that you heard what they said. I think communication is very important since it could act as a bridge in a relationship. That way it could restore any kind of misunderstanding that you might have for each other. Are you unwilling to face them or talk to them?" Sahara softly asked while sensing Yunifer's emotions. Since they are one, Sahara could sense what Yunifer was feeling right now. She knows that Yunifer was hesitant to talk to the trio and was unwilling to go out because she was afraid to suffer again and feel the pain that she had experienced. Sahara's POV. I know. I could tell that Yunifer was hesitant. She was restraining herself not to talk to them because of fear. Besides, no matter how hesitant or scared she was, I know that she was trying to break free from her shell. She was trying to gather her courage to face the trio. It's all because she loved them. She treasured them the most, especially Asher. I pursed my lips and let out a helpless sigh. You know that running away won't get you anything. Running away from your problems won't get anything, especially if you avoid it. Are you sure that you don't want to talk to them to clear up the misunderstandings that were used to have towards them? Suddenly, I heard her soft words calmly speaking through my heart. Are you doing this just because you're afraid to die? You know that we are going to die if I won't take over the control and let you, a wolf, control my body for a long time. You know the consequences. Are you scared? When I heard her retort, I couldn't help but chuckle. She was indeed adorable. No? Why? Well, I don't fear death. Either live or die is pretty much just the same thing to me. It's like a work of art. I'm not afraid of dying, especially dying together with you. However, I don't want you to die, and besides, as long as I'm alive, I will do anything just to protect you. You are half of me, and we are one. I'm not scared of anything. I don't fear anything, but the only thing that I fear the most is you. Dying with regrets. I want you to live and see that the world is such a beautiful creation, I softly said while caressing her spiritual body inside of me. When Yunifer heard my words, her emotions were in turmoil. I could sense her hesitation. But at the same time, it was like she had already reached her enlightenment. A beautiful arc appeared on my lips when I felt that because of my words, she was convinced. What you said makes sense. However, what if everything doesn't work out the way I wanted it to work? Yunifer softly asked. You already know the answer to that, darling. Just fuck it up, Sarah cheerfully said with a bright smile appeared on her lips. Slowly, Yunifer was regaining her strength. It was as if those thousands of chains that wrapped tightly around her body suddenly broke off, leading Yunifer to become free from anything that binds her. Thank you, Sahara, Yunifer softly said before she took over control of her body. I let out a soft chuckle. There's no need for thanks between us. I'll sleep for now, okay? Just wake me up if you're in danger. Yunifer chuckled. I will. Yunifer's pove? When I finally regained control of my body, the first thing I check when I woke up is my wrist, which I mercilessly slit to die last time. When I saw that there was no scar, a relieved sigh. It wouldn't be a good thing if there's a scar on my wrist, especially with the IQ of my brother Asher. He would surely ask me what happened and why I have scars. Besides, even if he won't ask me, he would be able to guess it immediately. Yunifer, you're awake. It was Ishid's voice who greeted me, and he even threw himself onto me, wrapping his arms around my waist and hugging me tightly in his embrace. I helplessly smiled and patted his back to calm him down. Yes, I'm already awake. Don't worry, I'm already all good now. I saw Drake and Lawrence walking in my direction while staring at me intently. I could already guess what they were thinking by just the way of staring at me. I gave them my warm smile and said, I'm really fine. I just lost my mind that time. That's why I did that. I'm okay, and I can assure you that there won't be a next time. Lawrence pursed his lips and answered seriously, There shouldn't be a next time. I nodded my head after hearing his words. I know. I apologize for worrying you. Then Drake sat next to me and leaned his head on my shoulder. I think we should discuss the misunderstanding you have towards us. Shall we? My whole body slightly stiffened and I felt guilty that I doubt them immediately without having concrete evidence. Even though I felt awkward talking about it, I still nodded my head in agreement since I also want to clear the misunderstandings I have towards them, and maybe they might also have misunderstandings towards me. Just when I was about to open my mouth to explain my side when suddenly the three of them apologized to me in unison. I'm sorry. We are sorry for not being able to explain it to you or tell you about our plan leading you to misunderstand us. It should be our responsibility to not hide anything from you because you are our Luna, our precious Luna. Please believe us that we don't have that kind of relationship with Samantha. She was just a stranger to us that our father was forced to marry us, to be our mate even if we didn't want to. Please believe us that the one we loved and the one we cared about is only you, and there is no one else. We swear with our lives on the line. They softly said while looking at me. I managed to maintain my smile despite that I wanted to cry after hearing their sorry. However, there was a sense of relief that I felt in my heart. It was as if something that blocked my heart suddenly disappeared, allowing me to be able to breathe without a problem. I didn't even notice the crystal tears that fell down my cheeks. The three of them leaned toward me and hugged me tightly, embracing me fully in their arms full of love and affection. I love you, Yunifer. I want you to be our mate, will you agree? They asked in unison while staring at me softly, kissing my cheeks, my forehead, and my lips. I couldn't help but chuckle at their behavior as I nodded my head. They caressed my face and wiped away the tears that fell on my cheeks. I will. I agree. Please mark me, my alphas. Please make me yours. I softly said as I throw myself to them, letting them do what they wanted to do with me. We will politely accept your request, our Luna, they hoarsely said while biting my nape, making me groan from the pain, and I couldn't help but close my eyes from the pain I felt. I could feel their canine deeply rotted on my flesh. I couldn't explain what I felt right now after they marked me. However, there was this kind of feeling that was deeply rooted in my heart, telling me that they are my mates, my alphas, and mine. I could feel a strong connection towards them as if we are linked to each other. The bond we have for each other became stronger after the successful mark. Finally, I can say that they are mine. That they are my alphas and I am their Luna. You're mine. They aggressively said in unison, and there was a sense of satisfaction that appeared on their faces as they hugged me tightly. I nodded my head and shyly hid my face in their shoulder. I'm yours. Just when Drake was about to lift my chin to kiss me when suddenly the door burst open, making me instinctively push them away from me and looked at the person who opened the door in a panic. Sister? He softly called out my name while he was hesitant to step inside my room. Hearing his voice, I immediately climbed off the bed without caring about the emotions of the trio, who was suddenly cut off from the intimate atmosphere and dashed towards Asher, who was vigilantly looking around the room. Asher! I called out his name. As soon as he saw me, his eyes sparkled as he threw himself into my embrace, hugging me tightly as he buried his face in my chest. You're back! I thought it would take longer. I missed you so much. His voice quivered, and he almost got choked. I could feel my shirt wet from his tears while his hand was tightly gripping the hem of my clothes. Seeing him acting like this, my heart clenched as I held him gently in my embrace while my hand was caressing his back to comfort him. I'm sorry for being late. It won't happen again in the future, okay? I softly said as I bent down my head and kissed his forehead. Asher raised his head and wiped his tears, then looked at me with reddened eyes. Promise? I gently smiled and pinched his cheeks. I promised. Sister won't leave you ever again. Promise me that you won't hurt yourself again, he sternly said, making me look at him with surprise. How did... Asher pursed his lips and said aggrievedly, I'm not that dumb enough to not notice what you've done to yourself. Yunifer's pove. I looked at Asher with widened eyes. I never thought that he would find out about it, especially since Sahara didn't even tell him about what I did, and she never really brought up a topic about my so-called harming myself as long as Asher was there. So, how come he was able to find out about that incident? Ash's eyes glanced at my pale wrist and couldn't help but to purse his lips even though no scar was visible on my wrist. It's already healed. There's no pain nor scar on my wrist anymore, I said while smiling at him, but the more I talked about it, the more aggrieved he became. I kept on coaxing him, but he was like a large stone that cannot be moved nor poked. In the end, I couldn't help but sigh and let my fingers slide down on his hair, brushing it softly while slowly explaining it to him. I'm sorry for being too reckless. I should protect myself and take care of myself. I won't do that ever again, knowing that there was someone who would be hurt after knowing that I hurt myself. I should start to treasure myself more, just as I treasured the people around me, I sincerely said while wiping the tears around the corner of his eyes. Asher pursed his lips and reluctantly nodded his head. I heard that you were being targeted by that so-called Alpha King. Why did he target you? Why does that Alpha King want to capture you? I looked at him with surprise upon hearing what he said. Just how much does he know? I turned my head and looked at the trio who were obediently sitting on the bed while staring at us, carefully listening to our conversation. When they saw me look at them, as if they could guess what I was about to ask them, they looked at me with those innocent expressions on their faces. They shook their head and shrugged their shoulders, indicating that they didn't know how Asher found out about this information, seeing that they were telling the truth, and were sincere that they weren't the ones who exposed that information to Asher, let them go. I let out a heavy sigh and glanced at Asher again, who was also staring at me. "Who told you about those? Where did you get that information from?" I asked him softly. Asher shook his head and solemnly answered, "Please answer my question first. I'll answer you later once you tell me first." Seeing that I can't make him answer me before I could answer him, I opened my mouth and started speaking. "I don't know what the Alpha King wanted to do with me, but all I know is that his intentions towards me aren't good. It was as if he had hatred towards me. No, it shouldn't be directed towards me, but rather directed towards my bloodline. Either it should be my mother or my father was his enemy. And after knowing that I was the daughter of his enemy, of course he would start making me suffer too. After all, I don't know whether Alpha King nor meet him in the past. I also haven't remembered anything that I angered him, especially since I don't know him. In other words, he was a stranger to me, but it seemed that I was some kind of enemy in his eyes." I spoke with one go while letting out a heavy sigh. I don't know why the Alpha King wanted to torture me, to make me experience what despair is, and then let me die on my own without letting his hand dirtied with blood. He was really cruel and ruthless, just like what the rumors said. After all, he almost achieved what he wanted to do with me, to brainwash me, to make me fall into the abyss and experience despair to the point that it would ruin me and it could make me go crazy, that I couldn't think of anything other than escaping the pain I felt. Which is why what happened after that would be killing myself. That happened to me in the prison cell. It was such a nightmare and wasn't a great experience for me, for someone like me who had been enduring abuse and nightmares from childhood. Drake, who was listening, couldn't help but give his comment. "Although that old man is my father and we don't know about him that much, but what we know about him is that he was very obsessed with our mother." Hearing this, my brows raised as I turned my head and looked at him. "Your mother? What about her?" Then it was Lawrence who continued. "Our mother is Isabella, and she was a human. Isabella, our mother happened to be mated with a werewolf, an alpha to be exact, and that was my father. However, from what our nanny said, our mother wasn't in deep in love with our father because she have someone whom she loved her whole life, to the point that she sacrificed herself towards that man, and it already happened when she gave birth to us." Then Ishid spoke, continuing Lawrence's words. "After that, our father was enraged to the point that he massacred the entire clan of her wife, our mother. After our mother's death, he became even more obsessed and even went ahead to kill the person whom our mother loved." After listening to their words, I couldn't help but be amazed at how dog-bloody their drama is. It was a love triangle. No, it was more like a one-sided love because based on what they said, suppose the Alpha King was in love with his wife, but his wife loved someone whom she also couldn't be with because she loved the man very much. She sacrificed herself for him after learning that the man she loved was in danger. Although having a mate is a blessing. But for some others, it was a curse, especially those who had people they love and wanted to spend their life with them. Take Isabella, the mother of the trio, as an example. She had someone whom she loved and wanted to spend her life with that person, but suddenly she was mated with someone whom she doesn't want to love and can't love. But maybe because Alpha King was too powerful and what he wants, he will get. That's why he forced Isabella to choose him and accept their marriage. It was quite complicated that I had a headache just by thinking about it. I looked at the trio, tilting my head to the other side, and looked at them with a frown. "So what does it have to do with me? It's not like I was the man whom you loved, so why would that Alpha King target me and wanted to kill me that much?" I know that they were also confused and badly wanted to know the reason for the Alpha King's hatred towards me, but I still couldn't help but hold on to a hope that they might know the reason, or they might have a vague idea about it. Just when I was about to let out a sigh out of disappointment, when suddenly Lawrence spoke. "Maybe it was because you are the daughter of his enemy that he loathed very much. That's why he wanted to capture you, torture you, and let you taste what the real despair is. Maybe he was letting you suffer and made you experience the pain that he experienced after the death of his wife and the reason behind her death? It was as if a whole new world welcomed me with the idea of his. I couldn't help but nod my head in agreement. What you said made sense, I softly murmured while I was still nodding my head. Lawrence seemed to be embarrassed after receiving a compliment. His ears burned. No, it was just a guess of mine. I don't know if it's true. Suddenly Drake spoke. Whether it is true or not, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we have to take down the Alpha King, especially tomorrow. I looked at him with surprise. Why is that? Why does it have to be tomorrow? Isn't it a bit abrupt? Drake sighed and nodded his head. I know that it was a bit abrupt, but no matter what, it has to be on that day. It has to be tomorrow. For what reason? My brows furrowed as I asked him. It's because after tomorrow, which is the next day, it is the anniversary death of our mother, the anniversary death of his wife. Every anniversary he would go on rampant, and like a madman, he would kill everyone whom he sees. He would start killing those who are related to his wife, and he won't spare their lives even if they are innocent. That's why we have to start our plan today and start to act it out so that we can take him down tomorrow. Drake answered while looking at me with solemnity. When I heard his words, I couldn't help but be stunned. I never thought that the Alpha King is that ruthless. Although I know that he was ruthless, I never expected that it was as high as Mount Everest. It should be better to take him down, rather than let him sit on his throne and keep on killing innocent people, taking their lives as if he was the one who created them and had the right to take them away. Besides, Drake clearly said that if Alpha King would go rampant at Isabella's anniversary death, for sure that the first target that he would very much want to kill is me. After all, from our deduction, I am the daughter of the enemy he loathed. I never expect that father had such a background. Besides, isn't he also a human? Maybe the wife of the Alpha King and father was once a lover, but was separated because of the so-called mate. Then Isabella reluctantly married the Alpha King because she was forced to do so, but her father misunderstands things and was heartbreak. He then went to a bar to relieve his stress, but ended up impregnating a woman, which is Silda, my wolf mother, because of one-on-one nightstand after that. Their father, who had a great sense of responsibility, took a responsibility to take care of Silda and married her. My eyes widened, and my jaw dropped to the floor. I was shocked by my imagination to the point that I wanted to curse. Like, what the hell is this kind of drama between them if that's the situation? Suddenly, I heard Sahara, who was supposed to be in a deep sleep, speak leisurely. Darling, I have something to tell you. I just remembered something after deciding to take sleep, but since this piece of information is important, so I forced myself to wake up. My wolf, Sahara said while yawning. Oh, may I ask what is this information that you're talking about? I asked, and besides, I don't have much time of correcting Sahara. Instead of calling me darling, she should call me Yunifer instead. He had Weverallotted said to her calling me that way, so it doesn't matter to me anymore. What you were thinking about earlier was true regarding the situation of your parents. After I remember that information, since we are one, the information was immediately transferred to you. All you said regarding you being the daughter of the Alpha King's enemy was true. All of it. My wolf, Sahara said, and I could hear the hint of guilt behind her words. As soon as she said this, I couldn't control my mouth from dropping open. Like, what the hell? It was all true? Yunifer's POV. I tried to calm myself after receiving such a heavy blow from the information that my wolf provided. Although I was the one who thought that way, I just thought that it was just my thoughts and guess maybe I was wrong. But who would have thought that what I was thinking was the truth? I unlocked the whole truth behind the secrets without even knowing. However, why do I feel that something is going on? It wasn't just about the one-sided love that had something to influence the Alpha King's thoughts, but there is also someone else. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid or what, but anyway, it's better to be sure. I don't want to get captured or kidnapped by the Alpha King again and spend my days in the prison cell. It was such a nightmare to me that all of my experience there was still a scar in my heart. It was suffocating, as if I was being pushed underwater and couldn't swim back to the surface because there was some kind of force that kept me underwater. Of the emotions, I had been trying to bury the inside my heart and trying to forget about those painful and suffocating emotions, but in the end, I couldn't bury them. It became out of control when I was in the prison cell. All of my emotions were like a thread that is tangled. If it's a paper, it will already be crumpled. Maybe at that time I couldn't take all of the emotions that made me fall in despair and felt like the world was against me, making me think that I was left alone, and it drove me crazy to the point of slitting my wrist just to try to get away from the pain. Just remembering what I've done made me feel a little foolish. Maybe that situation was the stupidest thing that I have ever made in my whole life. I glanced at Asher, who was yawning, but still refuses to close his eyes and sleep. "You should take a nap. You're sleepy," I softly said while looking at Asher, who immediately closed his mouth after yawning. "No, I'm going to stay up all night together with you. Who knows, maybe you'll be gone once I fall asleep. I heard that you were preparing to fight against that so-called Alpha King," Asher stubbornly said while pursing his lips and looking at me with seriousness in his eyes. I let out a heavy sigh after hearing this. Although I know that no matter what I would do, I couldn't hide something from my brother's eagle eyes. He has his way to know what I was doing or any information that related to me, just like how he was able to get the information that he would like to know about me. This Asher brother of mine is so sharp to the point that it's scary, but at the same time, it's cute. I stretched my hands and reached out to pinch his cheeks. "I will be fine, and besides, the triplets are with me, and it's not like I can't protect myself either," I said with full confidence. I heard his mouth crooked as he snickered. "You're telling that to yourself, who just harms yourself, and was even captured by an Alpha King?" Hearing this, I felt I was choked by my saliva and I couldn't help but avert my eyes. I suddenly felt guilty. I pursed my lips. I was brainwashed that time, and besides, it won't happen ever again. I'm not that weak. I'm psychically strong. "But mentality weak," Asher added while looking at me with a frown. I shook my head and was about to retort about it, but thinking about my past actions, I couldn't help but agree with his words silently. There's no need for me to deny it, especially since I am really weak deep inside, even though I'm physically strong. Anyway, if they didn't drug me, there's no need for Sahara to come out because, in the first place, I still have the chance to fight with them after they used the sleeping pills on me, to drag me inside their car to go to the Alpha King's private property and use the old mansion to keep me inside, then torture me secretly under the command of the Alpha King. Now I suddenly became interested in meeting this Alpha King. I want to ask him why he's doing this to me, and if he had other intentions other than because I'm his enemy's daughter. It won't happen ever again. I know that you are worried about me, and I can't keep on telling you not to worry about me, since if I were in your position, I would also be worried since I cared about you. But one thing that I can assure you is that I will try my best not to get hurt or do the same thing that I did when I was captured. It won't happen ever again, okay? So can you please trust me this once?" I softly asked, while my eyes were filled with sincerity, and I spoke from the bottom of my heart. Asher and I stared for a minute before he let out a helpless sigh and reluctantly agreed. Then, "Be careful. I will stay here in Alpha Havoc's mansion for the time being until Alpha King is defeated," Asher said. "Yes, this mansion is filled with security measures, so you are safe here," I said while smiling from ear to ear. When the trio who was listening to our conversation heard my words, their faces stiffened as they immediately disagreed. "No, we also have mansions too. Each one of us has mansions, and although the security measures aren't at the top-notch level compared to Havoc's mansion, we can also improve the security level right now." It was Ishid who immediately intervened while pouting. He was dissatisfied that I seemed to be more impressed with Alpha Havoc. I looked at those who were dissatisfied and couldn't help but let out a heavy sigh as I nodded my head, looking at them with sincerity as I praised them too so that they won't get jealous. Yes, your mansions are also good. I'll take a visit in the future if you want to invite me," and of course together with Asher," I softly said while trying to coax them. Hearing this, they nodded their head, and the satisfaction in their eyes couldn't be hidden by my naked eye. "Our mansion is also yours. What is ours is also yours." It was Drake who said with a solemn voice, making me chuckle as I nodded my head. Just when we were about to continue our talk when someone knocked on our door, making us stop talking as I was the one who took the initiative to stand up and walk towards the door, then opened it. It turned out it was Cale who knocked on the door. He still wore the kind and gentle expression he had on his face as he looked at me. There were shadow guards of the trio who tried to sneak inside the mansion but were immediately found by Havoc. If it wasn't because he sensed that they don't have killing intent or bad intentions, he would already have killed them. But thankfully, I immediately found him and stopped him before he could do it. Anyway, Havoc tried to interrogate them, but it was as if they were mute. They didn't say anything nor respond to Havoc's question. However, Havoc was able to find out who their masters were, and I don't know how he guessed it. Cale explained to me with a smile on his face, neither fast nor slow. I looked at him with surprise, but in the end I didn't say anything regarding that. Instead, I glanced at the trio who were inside the room, waiting for me to come back, but it seemed that they were able to perceive my gaze. They raised their head and looked at me with confusion. However, after seeing that I seemed to want to talk to them about something, they headed their way in my direction. Then I tacitly glanced at Asher, who also wanted to listen to our conversation, but his yawn betrayed him. He reluctantly let out a soft breath before he slumped his body on my bed, making me sigh in relief. Then I looked at the trio, who was looking at Cale. Cale was slightly uncomfortable at their presence, especially since he was an Omega, but there were 3 Alphas who had a strong aura, and even one of them had the strongest aura that is much stronger than Havoc, making him take a step back a little out of nervousness and fear. I was about to see his little movements, so I took a step forward next to him since he was already comfortable with my presence, and I could feel his stiff muscles slightly relax a little. Cale didn't bother to repeat the words he said to me earlier. Rather, he just said small words to them. "Your subordinates were in the living room together with Havoc," Cale softly said without meeting their gazes. When the trio heard this, they didn't mind how Cale treated them. Instead, they thanked him before they went to the living room. We also followed behind them. My eyes fell on the 2 shadow guards that were sitting on the sofa. Both of them had large bodies and were quite tall, but what shocked me the most was that they didn't have an aura. It was as if they didn't exist in this world. After all, each one of us had different kinds of aura that distinguish us. However, these 2 don't have. Just how much training did they put an effort into just to become what they had become right now? I could guess that there might be only a few of the triplets' shadow guards who were the same as these 2. I glanced at Lawrence and Ishid. Then my eyes fell on Drake. I think I could guess who their demon master was. Drake coldly looked at them and asked, "Did you get the information that I wanted you to find?" One of the shadow guards, who had blonde hair and a stoic face, expressionlessly nodded his head with politeness. "Yes, master. Do you want me to say it in front of them?" His voice contained no emotions, but his actions and words were polite in front of his masters. Drake nodded his head and nonchalantly said, "You can. Just tell me what information you got." After seeing that their master wanted them to speak freely, they opened their mouth and started to tell us about the information they got with their AI-like voice. While Jade and I were spying on the Alpha King's right hand, we found out that they seemed to be digging at the ground. When we took a closer look, they were digging at the tomb of the wife of the Alpha King. I don't know what they were trying to do with her corpse. When we heard his information, my eyes widened in shock as I subconsciously glanced at the trio, who didn't show any emotions, but I could feel the turbulence of their emotions. They were angry. I was able to perceive their emotions smoothly. Maybe it was because of our bond. I can easily tell that they were angry or sad, even though they won't show it on their faces. Just what the hell is that Alpha King trying to do with the corpse of his wife? Is he planning to make her rose from her coffin and bring her back to life? As soon as the words that Alpha Havoc uttered, every one of us went silent. Like, damn, what the hell is this sudden realization? Yunifer's Pova. All of us were staring wide eyes at Alpha Havoc after we heard what he just said, even though he was just nonchalantly saying those words. Even so, his words still made sense, that they reached the enlightenment of all of us. When Alpha Havoc saw us staring at him, his brows slightly raised while looking at us with a lazy expression. What are you looking at? Isn't it so easy to guess what the Alpha King was trying to do just based on his actions? When he said those words, we almost got choked as we looked at Havoc, who had an expression as if he was saying that it was so easy to guess. Why can't we guess it? I almost uttered the words that we aren't as sharp and had detective-like skills as him, but I held it back and just averted my gaze. I glanced at Drake and the twins, who had also complicated expressions plastered on their faces as if they were helpless in this situation. They didn't expect that their father was planning to revive his wife. But then, Drake was the calmest among the three. He raised his head and looked at Alpha Havoc with an arrogant look. If the Alpha King had the plan to revive his wife, then how come he only plans to revive her now? Why not last year or the first day that our mother died? Drake calmly asked while looking straight at Alpha Havoc as if he was trying to find an answer from him. When Alpha Havoc heard his question, he raised his brows and shrugged his shoulder. How would I know? It's not like I'm the Alpha King, and besides, I don't know what he felt when he lost his loved ones and why he seemed to be obsessed with his wife even after she died. I looked at Alpha Havoc with a frown, then my eyesight glanced at Kale, who just remained silent, even after hearing Havoc's indifferent words, and he was even implying with his words that the Alpha King was dumb and stupid for being obsessed with someone who already died. It was as if he couldn't feel any emotions. No, more like he doesn't love someone. I immediately shook my head and erased those thoughts. After all, how could that be? Someone like Alpha Havoc isn't someone who couldn't love or loved someone, especially the way he would look at Kale was different. And he seemed to put Kale in his heart, a place in his heart where he carefully put Kale in. But in the end, I didn't intend to pry more about what kind of relationship they had. After all, it seemed to be a complicated relationship. Besides, even if I would pry further, it seemed that Kale was trying to hide it either and doesn't want to talk about it. I let out a heavy sigh as I happened to glance at Kale, who was also staring at me. It was as if he could guess what I was thinking, which made him shake his head slightly at me, as if he was conveying not to pry further about it or talk about it. I gently smiled at Kale and nodded my head as I mouthed at him. I know, don't worry, I'm on your side. No matter what, even if this Alpha Havoc is strong and helped them with their fight against Alpha King, it doesn't mean that he would have fought against him if he would dare to make Kale hurt, or if he did something that is against Kale's wishes. Then suddenly, Lawrence spoke while also looking at Havoc with disagreement. You will understand someday once you see your loved ones on the brink of death. Are you cursing me? Besides, isn't that Alpha King your enemy, so why are you siding with him now? Alpha Havoc looked at them with a hint of mockery. Drake sighed and calmly answered without fluctuations. We are not siding with him, we were also against his cruel methods, and we hated the fact that he mercilessly slaughtered innocent people as if he was the one who owned their life. And besides, we can't forgive him for the fact of hurting our Luna. Although I can empathize that he loved our mother to the point that because of that so-called love, it drove him crazy to the point of wishing his wife to come back to his arms. But just like what I have said, we don't side with him. Anyway, it would be better if he were off the throne because he doesn't deserve to be the Alpha King. When Havoc heard this, he just shrugged his shoulder and nonchalantly nodded his head, but his face was telling us that it had nothing to do with him, so why bother empathizing with the Alpha King? It would just waste his energy and effort to do so. Seeing him being like this, we didn't continue our topic. Instead, we glanced at the two shadow guards who were listening to the conversation with a complicated look, but it was immediately suppressed and their emotionless and stoic expressions appeared on their faces. What else do you know? Drake asked coldly at Jade. Jade spoke calmly, neither fast nor slow. I have heard their conversation that they wanted to capture Yunifer. It seemed that they still didn't let go of the idea of capturing Miss Yunifer. My brows furrowed as I looked at Jade, who spoke. I couldn't help but ask him, "Do you know any other reasons why the Alpha King wants to capture me that badly? I don't remember messing with him in the past. Is it just because I was the daughter of the man he hated? The man who stole the heart of the person whom he loves?" Jade just glanced at him and seemed that they didn't plan to answer his question. However, when they received such a furious expression from their master, they obediently opened their mouth and answered my questions one by one. To tell you the truth, we are still investigating why the Alpha King wanted to capture you that badly. We don't know why he was doing it. The only person who can answer all of your questions would be the Alpha King alone. Jade calmly said while looking at me. I couldn't help but sigh upon hearing that he also doesn't know. Suddenly, I felt someone patting my head, making me turn my head and glanced at Lawrence, who did it. Don't worry, we won't let the Alpha King achieve what he wanted. We will protect you, Lawrence said with solemnity on his words. I couldn't help but smile as I also patted their shoulders. I understand and I appreciate it very much. However, I would also appreciate it more if you would protect yourself also and let yourself not be in danger. Just what they were about to continue the discussion that they left off earlier when suddenly a loud bell rang around the living room, making us silent. Our eyes stared at the bell that was placed on the wall, which kept on ringing. When I was about to ask Havoc, I saw his face turn bad as his expression turned solemn. It seemed that the Alpha King had already made a move. His subordinates were already surrounding my mansion, and they seemed to be trying to sneak inside. Alpha Havoc said, while his face darkened as he went towards the table that was filled with stuff near the medium-sized bell that kept on ringing. It wasn't until that Alpha Havoc did something to it that the bell stopped ringing. After that, I saw him open his laptop and type something on it. We all saw a small system appear on the LED screen of the laptop. Then it suddenly spoke with an AI-like voice. All systems are locked down, activating self-defense, unlocking the security measures to their max level. My eyes glanced at Alpha Havoc, who was listening to what the system said, and he let out a slight relief before he looked at us. As long as their strength isn't higher than us, or if they don't find a programmer who is higher level than me, they won't be able to destroy the mechanisms that I put to strengthen the security level of my house, Havoc explained with a cold tone, and his eyes were dark, clearly annoyed that there were some ants who dared to break his security level. Seeing him like this, Kale let out a sigh and softly patted his shoulder to comfort him. Don't worry, they won't be able to break your security level. Havoc pursed his lips as he looked at Kale with an aggrieved expression. I hope so, too. I couldn't help but roll my eyes after seeing that he was pretending to be sad to get comfort from Kale. Then suddenly, strong arms wrapped tightly around my waist as if the owner of these hands were afraid that I would disappear or would get kidnapped again. When I looked up, it was Drake who had a solemn expression and his face didn't look good either. Even Lawrence and Ishid had the same expression on their faces, and they were guarding me tightly to protect me. I have to take Asher. He was sleeping in my room, and if someone would barge in that room, for sure they would use my brother as a hostage to make me weak. After all, Asher is my weakness. I also can't afford to let Asher be harmed again, just like what happened before, that it left him a trauma. I helplessly said while I was trying to break free from Drake's arms. However, instead of letting me go, the hands that wrapped around my waist tightened even more with no intention of letting me slip away, which made me sigh as I looked at Drake with pleading eyes. Then suddenly, Havoc spoke. If you're worried about the safety of your brother, just let him hide in our bed for a while. My room is the safest place in this mansion, since I put a lot of effort to strengthen the level of security in my room in case something would happen. I never thought that I would use my room as this kind of thing. Hearing this, I looked at him with grateful eyes and was about to rush towards my room when suddenly I saw Ishid walking towards my room where Asher was currently sleeping right now. Seeing this, I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Since my brother is already in the safest place, I could finally relax. Suddenly, the system in Havoc's computer spoke along with its AI-like tone. Danger! Danger! Intruder alert! Intruder alert! It kept on buzzing again and again, repeating the same words that it spat out. If it wasn't for Havoc, who turned off the laptop, for sure that it would keep on saying those annoying words. Anyway, Alpha Havoc's face couldn't control his expression anymore. His face became more livid as his jaw clenched. He went towards his room as fast as he could and then came out with a large bag behind him. Suddenly, he laid it on the table, which made us curious about what it is. Well, it was just me and Kale, who were curious about what was inside of it, since the others looked like they already guessed what it was. As soon as Havoc opened the large bag, my eyes suddenly widened at the contents of the bag. It was a weapon along with its bullets. There were guns, silencers, daggers, knives, poison, and maybe more that were put in one large bag. At the same time, I couldn't help but be amazed at how well prepared Alpha Havoc is. Third person Paviv. The man who was sitting on the throne, whom they called Alpha King, was resting his face on his palm as his eyes were coldly glancing at his subordinates, who were trembling like a little rabbit being caught by its prey and were on their knees, kneeling at the Alpha King, who possesses such a strong aura that could make even an alpha slightly jolted from the Alpha King's dominance. Alpha King, we are here to report that we've already sent hundredths of wolves from our pack to capture Yunifer, as per what you've ordered. We will do our best to capture her. She is currently staying at Havoc's residence. It was the Alpha who politely reported while looking at the Alpha King, trying to see if he was angered or not by his words. After seeing that the Alpha King didn't seem to be angered by them, the Alpha subordinate let out a relieved sigh. Then the Alpha King coldly answered while emitting such dominance. Very good. You should capture her as fast as possible. You need to capture her before the anniversary of my wife, or else you'll be able to see what I can do. When they heard the threatening words of the Alpha King, they slightly shivered as they lowered their heads even more. They couldn't hide their nervousness and fear with their actions. We will capture her, Alpha King. The Alpha subordinate politely said while looking at the Alpha King. Despite that, he was slightly shaken by the stares of the Alpha King. Alpha King nodded his head lazily, and there was satisfaction appeared on his face. Then be sure to bring the victory. Don't let me see failure. I dislike failure very much, and I'm sure that all of you know how cruel I am and how perfectionist I am. When they heard this, they quivered and nodded their head like chicken pecking grains. Alpha King let out a sigh of satisfaction and waved his hands at them. You can leave now. Don't let me see your faces until you manage to capture Yunifer before the anniversary of my wife. They all nodded their head and quietly leave the Alpha King's hall. They immediately went on their way to get what their Alpha King wants. That is to capture Yunifer at all costs. They all went to their assigned packs. They all gathered their weapons and all the things they needed to capture Yunifer. Back in the Havoc's mansion. The triplets were glaring at the door as they emit such murderous intent, while they were protecting Yunifer consciously. Alpha Havoc spoke with coldness in his tone. Be prepared, since the hacker that was their ally was much stronger than me. In 10 minutes, they will be able to crack the security in my mansion. After he said that, he walked towards Kale with a nonchalant expression on his face. He didn't even realize that what he did was as if he was trying to protect Kale. Kale didn't even realize these small movements from Havoc were trying to protect him. If ever those 100 wolves that are on standby outside would attack them, once the hacker would be able to crack Havoc's security, he would be able to protect Kale. It was also the same with the trio, who was standing side by side with Yunifer and was protecting her carefully if something came up. Meanwhile, Yunifer's mind was filled with Asher's safety. Although she trusted Havoc that his main bedroom had tight security, much tighter than the security of his mansion, Yunifer still couldn't help but feel nervous at the same time, worried about the safety of Asher. Yunifer couldn't hold back from looking at Havoc and asked, "Are you sure that even if Asher woke up and tried to open the door, he won't be able to open it on the inside?" Havoc turned his head towards Yunifer and nodded his head after hearing her doubts. Yes, you don't have to worry too much about your brother, since he is safe in my room. You should focus and worry about yourself, since you were the one who was being targeted by them. Kale, on the other hand, who heard Havoc's words, glanced at Yunifer and gently smiled at her. Don't worry too much nor think too much. We voluntarily helped you, so you don't need to feel bad about implicating us. Kale softly said with a smile on his face. Now, this is the real holy saint. Yunifer squeezed out a smile after hearing his words, despite that she was a bit guilty on the inside. Suddenly, Havoc snickered after hearing Kale's words. You were the only one who was willing to help them. Kale's body slightly stiffened after what Havoc said. His eyes glanced at Havoc, and there was a hint of guilt that flashed in his eyes when he met his eyes. He lowered his gaze as his eyelashes fluttered slightly. Then you should stay in your bedroom and let me stay with them here. You don't need to help us that much. I'm sorry for bothering you and even implicating you. I promise that I'll pay you next time. I'll remember this as my debt, Kale said with solemnity while looking at Havoc. Havoc's eyes deepened as he looked at Kale. He coldly answered, No need. I would look more cowardly if I would stay in my bedroom and let the rest of you handle the wolves. Besides, this is my mansion, and I can't let it be destroyed and become their playground. Hearing such a cold retort coming from Havoc, Kale ended up pursing his lips and remained silent. Instead, he looked dejected. When Yunifer saw them acting like this, especially Havoc, who was acting like this towards Kale, she couldn't help but click her tongue and shrug off her shoulder. However, she still didn't ask or talk about what was going on between the two of them. Instead, she focused herself on the triplets, whose face was aggrieved, and they have this I'm jealous look plastered on their faces. Yunifer let out a soft chuckle upon seeing them acting like this. Stop acting like a baby. They were going to invade Havoc's mansion right now. Yunifer reminded them, making their expression change from dejected to a max level of seriousness. After 10 minutes of waiting that only feels like 1 minute, there were almost 20 wolves who managed to get inside Havoc's mansion. Some of them go through the windows, some of them go through back doors, and some of them force their way in by making a large hole in the wall of the mansion. Yunifer's breath hitched as she threw a kick and punched the wolves in their faces after seeing them try to attack her from behind. Even Lawrence, Ishid, and Drake's faces darkened even more, as they used their sharp claws and slit the faces of their opponents. They didn't even try to let even one of the wolves touch Yunifer. They guard her tightly as they focused on killing or knocking the wolves unconscious. They didn't spare even one of them and continued to massacre them. Though this time, it seemed that the wolves that the Alpha King had sent were much stronger than the last time, they were still helpless against the 3 alphas who were guiding tightly their target, which is Yunifer. Meanwhile, on Havoc's side, his face was as cold as ice, as he killed his opponent with a lack of emotions, as if he was just killing an insignificant cannon fodder. That was the expression that he had on his face. Despite that, he had no expression on his face. Every time that someone would try to touch Kale, his eyes would be narrowed and would impressively show an angry expression as he would angrily kill those wolves who would try to touch even a single tip of Kale's hair. Although Kale seemed to be weak, fragile, and squamish, especially with how pale and slightly thin he is, and besides, he was also an omega that is weaker among the wolves, he was the calmest among them. He didn't show any expression like dejected fright or sad when he would see those wolves being torn apart and their blood would splash on the ground. Aside from that, he was also well protected by Havoc, even though it seemed that he was angry at him for being stubborn, for not listening to him when Havoc said that he should just stay in his bedroom, but Kale kept on insisting that he would stay here and want to help Yunifer. Because of that, Havoc was angered to the point that he almost vomited with blood. No matter how angry he was, he still couldn't let Kale go alone on the battlefield and leave him alone. Seeing that Havoc was trying to fight against the 50s of the wolves who attacked them from time to time, Kale couldn't help but feel worried at the same time. He was guilty. Havoc's clothes were already stained with blood, and his eyes were sharply glaring at his opponent. He was almost transformed into his beast form, and his canine teeth were showing. "You don't have to protect me. I can also fight," Kale softly said while looking at Havoc with worry. Despite that, Havoc was busy dealing with his opponent. His ears were ready to listen to Kale. That's why when Kale spoke, he heard it clearly, despite that the whole mansion was loud and noisy. "I'm not trying to protect you. I'm trying to protect my home," he solemnly said without looking at him. Feeling at loss, Kale just sighed and decided to help even a little. He pulled out the sharp daggers in his pocket and used them as his weapon for dealing with his enemies. On the other hand, Drake was also furious when he saw that someone just managed to scratch his shoulder. Out of anger, he tore that wolf apart, then grabbed one of the wolves from his opponent and coldly spoke to him with a murderous aura that covered all over his body. "Where is the Alpha King?" he coldly yet angrily asked the wolf. "You think I would tell you? In you." The wolf wasn't able to finish his words when Drake already twisted his head and stabbed his heart with his claws. Then Lawrence, who was fighting with the enemy, also spoke to Drake. "He must be on his throne, the place where my mother bought for Alpha King. He is very obsessed with Mother, so for sure that he was there, sitting and reminiscing in that place." When Drake heard this, his eyes sparkled as an evil grin appeared on his lips, making him look like a villain. A hot villain. It was as if Drake couldn't wait to rush out and behead the Alpha King to take the throne from him as an Alpha King. Although he wasn't obsessed with being an Alpha King because he doesn't like the current Alpha King, then he will take over his position even if it means using cruel methods to become the Alpha King. While Yunifer was also fighting against the wolves from time to time with the use of her bare hands. She was different from Sahara, who would easily kill her opponent, but when it comes to her, she would rather disable his opponent and beat them to a pulp until they could hardly open their eyes. However, in Yunifer's side view, her eyes squinted as she immediately pushed the wolf in front of her and rushed towards a certain direction where Kale was about to hug Havoc from behind, while behind Kale were Sharp Claw that was about to attack Kale's back. It all happened too fast before Yunifer could get there, and before Havoc could have time to react to why Kale suddenly hugged him from behind. He thought that he was coaxing him and would be the one who lowered the pride, but Kale hugged him so that the wolf who was sneaking behind him won't be able to harm him. Havoc's eyes narrowed as his jaw clenched. He immediately unleashed such strong force that come out from the bottom of his emotions and turned his back and immediately slashed the one who stabbed Kale from behind and tear him to pieces. He was so angry to the point that he wanted to chop the one who hurt Kale to pieces. When Yunifer got there, it was already too late. She stared at Kale, who was weakly behind, held by Havoc, whose eyes were slightly reddened. Tears start to fall down her cheeks as she angrily killed each one of the wolves who would block her way. Third-person POV. Kale's body became soft as he was being held by Havoc, who kept on calling out his name. His eyes fluttered as he tried to stop the blood from gushing out of his body by pressing his hand on Kale's back, which had a large wound that he received after saving Havoc from being stabbed. Kale, hang on for a bit, okay? I will send you to the PAX doctor. I will make sure that you will be fine, okay? Just hang on. Havoc kept on chanting while caressing Kale's pale face as he weakly raised his eyelid and looked at Havoc. A soft smile appeared on Kale's lips as he weakly looked at Havoc. "And now I've already paid back my debt." Havoc's face stiffened as his eyes started to redden. He pursed his lips and softly whispered, "There's no need for that between the two of us. You know that well. I'm sorry for being prideful." Kale let out a soft chuckle, but he ended up coughing up blood, making Havoc's face stiffen as the hand that was caressing Kale's face was trembling. Seeing Havoc being like this, the corner of his lips lifted. This was the first time that he ever saw such enormous emotions coming from him. For someone who is cold and tends to hide his feelings, this was the first time that he ever showed such big reactions towards something. Kale weakly raised his hand and reached out to touch Havoc's face, but when his hand couldn't reach it, it was Havoc's initiative to lean forward, bringing his face towards Kale's hands. I know, but if I can't make it. Before Kale could finish his words, Havoc's eyes reddened even more as he hugged him tightly in his arms, kissed his lips, and said with a heavy tone, "Please don't say it. I'll send you to the pack doctor." He softly begged while tears beamed in his eyes. His hands were trembling when he dialed his pack's doctor, telling him to his mansion as soon as possible. Havoc just remained on the floor while hugging Kale, not even minding those wolves who tried to attack him. If they want to attack, just let them attack. However, those wolves couldn't get closer to Havoc and Kale because Yunifer had already handed Sahara control of her body. It all happened when Yunifer's anger rose to Mount Everest, and Sahara was able to wake up from her deep sleep. She asked Yunifer to hand over control of her body and leave all of the mess to her. Of course, Yunifer immediately hands over control of her body, especially since she was slightly shaken by the fact that she was able to kill a living being, and it wasn't just one that she killed, but rather 10 wolves. After Sahara sensed turbulent emotions of Yunifer, she immediately suggested handing over Yunifer's control. "Yunifer, be careful!" It was Lawrence who shouted, while at the same time killing another wolf who tried to bite him. Before the wolf could stretch his hands and attack Yunifer, he suddenly felt his vision tilt and he felt his head roll on the ground. He died being separated from his body. The culprit was Sahara, who had a satisfied expression plastered on her face when she was able to beat down her enemy. Sarah's eyes glanced at Kale, who was deeply in pain and was pale as paper, while Havoc kept on talking to him, calling out his name and begging him not to close his eyes and leave him. Sahara stand in front of them and not letting a single one of the wolves harm the 2 precious souls, especially Kale, who was innocent and helped Yunifer without asking for something back, and his heart was the sincerest. Of course, Sahara won't let him die. When Havoc noticed what Sahara was doing, he just pursed his lips and let him do what she wanted. It wasn't until Sahara spoke in a cold tone. "He's bleeding. If this would continue, he would die. Omegas like him don't have much ability like an alpha or a beta who can easily heal their wounds. He won't make it if this would get delayed." "What do you know? If this wasn't because of you, he won't be in this situation." Havoc angrily shouted as his eyes were glaring at Sahara with the intent to kill. He gnashed his teeth in anger while clenching his fist. However, despite that, when Havoc shouted earlier, his voice contained alpha dominance, and it was enough to make those who are lower than him shivered. But Sahara was standing fine without feeling anything. Her cold eyes were just looking at Havoc, then her gaze went to Kale, who was also looking at her with a weak smile, but he had this apologetic expression plastered on his face, especially after when he heard Havoc's words that were blaming her. However, Sahara didn't even pay attention to his expression. Instead, she bent down and took Kale from Havoc's arms, making Havoc glare at her. Viscously, he looked like he was going to kill Sahara if she would continue touching Kale, grabbing him away. "What are you doing?" he angrily asked while he hugged Kale tightly, not letting him from being taken away from him. Sahara coldly looked at Havoc and coldly answered, "If you don't give him to me, he will die." Not even the pack doctor could save him, since the large hole at his back won't be easily treated by medicine, unless your pack doctor is a god who can easily heal his wound and even bring him back to life. When Havoc heard this, he was contemplating at first, but when he saw that Kale's breath was gradually weakening, he immediately let Sahara take him in her arms. Even though he was reluctant, but since Sahara had a way, then he will do anything. He can even sell his soul to the devil, even if it means healing Kale. "You better take good care of him. If anything happens to him, I'll kill." Before Havoc could continue his words, he found a hand wrapped tightly around his neck, preventing him from letting out his words, and he felt suffocated. Sahara's eyes dimmed as her other hand was holding Kale as if he was holding a pad of paper, while her other hand throttled his neck. "I've had enough of your threats. If it was Yunifer, she would just let you threaten her, but since I'm Sahara, I won't let anyone dares to threaten either me or Yunifer." Sahara coldly exclaimed while glaring at Havoc, who couldn't get out of Sahara's hand. It wasn't until Sahara felt a cold hand tap her shoulder, making Sahara glance at Kale, who was weakly smiling at her, but his eyes were telling Yunifer to let him go. Sahara snorted and quickly let go of Havoc. And who was that person who just said that he wasn't as stupid as the Alpha King who would be obsessed with his wife, and to the point that he would do anything to make her live again? Who was the person who said that you won't feel those kinds of emotions? Now look at you. I'm sure you're starting to understand those emotions. After she said that, she turned around and calmly walked towards the pack of wolves who kept on rushing in their direction, especially after seeing that all of Yunifer's back was open since she was holding Kale in her arms. However, when Havoc saw through their plans, his eyes reddened from anger as he became like a killing machine, killing those who tried to approach them. It wasn't until Lawrence and Ishid appeared in front of Sahara, and when they saw her holding a man in her arms, they didn't even bother to get jealous, especially after seeing the situation of Kale, whose breathing was gradually weakened, and he seemed to be in a lot of pain, but despite that, he never let out a groan nor scream from the pain. When Sahara noticed that Drake was missing, her brows furrowed as she glanced at the two. "Where is Drake? We need to go to where the Alpha King is." Sahara raised her voice and was trying to look at Drake. Lawrence still answered with a gentle tone while trying to soothe her emotions. "Don't worry, Drake is fine. He went to the Molev mansion where Alpha King was in. He wanted to take him down." "Only him?" Sahara's brows furrowed while looking at them. Just when they were about to answer Sahara's question when Havoc shouted from behind, "Why do you keep on blabbing? My mate is already on the brink of death?" Havoc's veins throbbed and popped up on his forehead, clenching his fist from anger. When Sahara heard this, her face immediately changed as she nodded her head toward Lawrence and Ishid. "Go to the Molev mansion," Sahara ordered with a serious tone. Then she glanced at the panic-looking Havoc. "To save your mate, you better cooperate with us to kill the Alpha King. We have to take him down before Kale died, or else Kale would no longer be saved," Sahara said with a serious tone, making Havoc's eyes widen as his whole body stiffened. Havoc immediately nodded his head without reluctance. There was only anger that hadn't dissipated from his heart while his eyes glanced at Kale, who still had a gentle smile plastered on his face, despite that he was in pain. Seeing him like this, Havoc's heart was clenched as felt sore in his nose. Havoc was following Sahara, who was holding Kale in her arms. Although he didn't know why Sahara had to hold Kale in her arms, he didn't dare to ask because it would only waste their time talking, especially since Kale was in danger. There were still a few wolves who were still alive, catching up on us and preventing us from running away. But before Havoc could kill them, Ishid and Lawrence tacitly killed them within just a few minutes. Then they also caught up with Sahara, who didn't rest when she was using her strength in holding Kale while at the same time running as fast as she could without stopping. It wasn't until they were able to reach the Molev mansion that was placed in the middle of the large forest. There were even wolves who were their enemy, growling at them, but Havoc, Ishid, and Lawrence paved way for Sahara, who kept on running until she was able to arrive at the Molev mansion. When Sahara arrived, her eyes slightly dimmed when she saw such a bloody scene. The hallway was filled with blood, and there were even wolves who were in such a cruel state, bathing in their blood. Sahara's nose wrinkled as there was disgust plastered on her face when she stepped her foot inside the hallway. She kept on reminding herself that the hallway was clean, trying to brainwash herself. When she arrived at the main hall, her eyes slightly shook at the sight. He saw the Alpha King's white robe was covered with blood, but he was still breathing. He doesn't have any emotions plastered on his face other than anger. When Sahara glanced at Drake's state, he was also no worse than the Alpha King. There were large wounds on his body, but he didn't mind them since they would Henetheists own the blood stain left on his shirt. Sensing Sahara's presence, Drake's eyes widened as he looked at her with surprise, especially after seeing that she was holding a man in his arms. "What are you doing here? Why did you send your foot into the den of the tiger?" Drake couldn't help but shout from worries. However, Sahara just gave him a look before her eyes glanced at the Alpha King, who was also looking at him. "You can't bring back your wife from the dead, especially since she had been dead and was already a corpse." Sahara coldly said while looking straight at the Alpha King, who had dark circles underneath his eyes. When Alpha King heard this, he sneered. So you already regain your memories?